Okay, welcome everybody in the room and everyone that's watching online to this evening's Place Committee. So I'll just pass you over to Claire from Democratic Services, who's going to read us a brief housekeeping note. So thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Chairman. Please note that this meeting of the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor car park in front of the building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting, including laptops for those in the room. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Can I take apologies?
Yes, we've received apologies for this meeting from Councillor Millie Earle, and she's been substituted by Councillor Sandra Moore.
Thanks for subbing, Councillor Moore. Okay, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disposable pecuniary interests or any other interests on items of the agenda they want to declare now? Okay, I'm seeing no one indicating, so we'll move on to the next agenda point, which is agenda item number 4, which is minutes of the last meeting. I've had no comments or concerns raised about those, so I'm quite happy to agree those and sign those off. Is everyone in agreement? Agreed.
Chair, can I just confirm, sorry, that's minutes of the meetings that were held on the 16th of June and the 21st of September.
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks, Claire. Okay, moving along to public issues. So we've had a public statement which Claire's going to read out for us from Mr. McClincy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in advance of that, I just wanted to mention that we've had no public petitions or questions for this meeting. So the statement received is in relation to agenda item 6, and Mr. McKinstry's statement reads as follows. Doubtless, Lord Kerslake knows what he's taken on in accepting the chairmanship of Future Places. The company is controversial. Many say its work could be done by the council in-house at significantly lower cost. No need for loans or bonus schemes. The main problem, however, is the company's opaqueness. No minutes published since March, no outline business cases produced, not even for the 3 small car park sites in Poole, despite the company existing for 18 months now. Greater visibility and more widespread consultation, plus discarding the term charrette as a synonym for consultation, would benefit this company immeasurably. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks to Mr. McClincy for his question. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is Future Places, which is an introduction from the new chair, Lord Kerslake. So good to see you, even if it's online. So over to you, and good to see you.
Yes, good evening, and this evening in person. But I have a prior commitment this evening that I need to honour as a speaking engagement. So tonight, really, I wanted to say a few words about Be First Future Places, my role as chair, and then open it up to questions. Now, I should say that we had, I think, a very useful session last week with councillors. I set up a come and meet us meeting with the councillors last week, and many turned up, I'm pleased to say, and we had, I think, a very good robust discussion. Just let me say a few points really by way of introduction, and then by all means come in and ask me questions. Firstly, why did I take on the role? Well, actually, I think there's huge potential in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, huge opportunities. It's already a great place. People love the place already, but there are things that could and should be better. And in particular, a need to improve the quality of some of the buildings, but also actually to ensure there's more housing accessible to people with different incomes. So there's some big and important things to do, but actually some big opportunities as well. And that's what excited me, I think, about the role. I think the second thing that I felt was very attractive was the commitment to stewardship. That's to say, thinking through the long-term implications of what the council is seeking to do, building to last, if you like, creating great places as well as new buildings, and thinking about the future and sustainability in everything that's done. I think the third reason why I took it on is that I have now got some experience of being the chair of a number of arm's length bodies focused on delivery. I've also, by the way, set up ones previously in my role as chief exec with, of course, the approval of the council. I think I heard very much the comments in the letter you read out. And of course, you've got to be absolutely sure that the money you spend here is spent wisely and with value. But I think if you get it right, you can bring a focus and expertise to the task of economic growth, housing and regeneration that is hard for the council to achieve on its own. None of that is to say the council can't and should do great things itself, but it's often very hard with the very wide range of things that council officers have to deal with to bring that focus and expertise and talent to some of the challenges that you're seeking to address, and in particular to ensure that major projects move forward. So in terms of where things are now, firstly, I'd say the last year has been a year of setup. I'm very much aware of that. And that can be quite frustrating. And the point made about business cases is a well-made point. And that's why I'm very keen, and I've set it as a target at the last board, to bring forward between 4 and 5 schemes to the cabinet meeting in January for outline business case approval. That's not full business case, that'll have to come after that, but that's an ambition that we're seeking to achieve as Future Places. The second thing I'd say is that I'm conscious that it has been controversial and contested, and clearly, without stating the obvious, I guess, things are quite contested in the council itself. What I'd hope is that we can get BCP Future Places to a position where it is seen by all sides, if you like, all parties and all councillors, as something of huge value to the area and more than justifying the expenditure that's involved in it. Just quickly coming on to the issue of spending, as you'll know, there's an arrangement where instead of taking money from the council's direct budget, there is a cash facility, if you like, a borrowing facility or cash flow facility of up to 8 million. We're not at that figure at the moment, and I would hope to keep below that. The intention is to recover that cost through the development of the schemes and the added value that they produce. And I think from my previous experience, particularly with Be First in Barking and Dagenham, I do think that's possible with focus and application in terms of what we do. Just on the question of transparency, I actually completely agree on transparency. We need to be very open and accountable for what we do as BCP Future Places. We are, and I should be clear about this, a wholly owned subsidiary of the council. We're your organisation, and we should recognise that. One of the things that has come forward, and I'm very much supportive of it, is that a committee should be created, cross-party committee, meeting at least quarterly, where we would report on progress of Future Places and be questioned by members. You could call it like a stakeholders committee, and I think that would be a welcome addition, and I think that would give you the level of transparency. I think on consultation, there are obviously going to be different views about whether charrettes is a good term, but what I think is really important and came out in the meeting that we had last week is that local councillors are brought into the process ahead of the consultation. So they shouldn't, in a sense, be surprised by the consultation. They should be early consultees and then drawn into the process. And I think perhaps that's something that needs to be strengthened for future consultations going forward. Just finally, a last point I'll make and then I'll stop. I'm the chair. I'm now in the process of recruiting 2 further non-executives. We have already had the deputy leader step back from the board as per plan, and when we've recruited at least 1 more of the non-executives, and as I say, it'll be between 2 and 3 we're going to recruit, the leader will step back, and therefore the board itself will be very much made up of independent board members acting on behalf of the council, delivering your your priorities, and we'll manifest those priorities through the business plan that we aim to bring forward, a revised business plan, I should say. We've already got one. Bring forward a revised business plan in February, March of next year. I'll stop there, Chair. I hope that gives you a quick overview of where we are, and then I'm very much open to questions and comments.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that introduction. I think we're really looking forward to seeing those schemes come to fruition in January. It's great to obviously meet you, get a face to future places. So obviously, just to remind members, this session's for questions. It's not really a scrutiny sort of session because we haven't got a report to refer to. So any members, have members got any questions they would like to put forward? Oh, Councillor Brooks.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It's more an observation, and thank you very much for your introduction and setting out some of the things that we're going to hear about coming into the future. I attended in Christchurch yesterday a charrette with a wide range of representatives from the community, councillors, schools, events. And I must say, the time being taken by Future Places to actually get under the skin of the issues and the concerns and the opportunities as people see was very impressive. I was rather taken that we had Prince's Trust representatives actually facilitating some of that discussion. And that enabled people to feel that they were, in a sense, open to express themselves in a way that actually can be seen as being opportunities and direction on things that maybe that they couldn't feel that they could talk about elsewhere. So I rather valued that. As with my colleague sitting behind here, Mike Brooke, we're both directors of Bournemouth Development Company, and we sit alongside Muse as a joint partner in the Bournemouth Development Company. And we're very aware, I think both Mike and myself, is the long period of gestation to bring developments forward. And I can really appreciate some of the frustration that we as members have seeing Future Places being established. What's next? When's it coming? What do we want to see? And I can really appreciate the time and the skill and the detailed study that actually goes in to preparing business cases. So I would just say to members, I really look forward to seeing the presentations which will come forward in the coming months at Cabinet and also to full Council, which will give us an opportunity to see really what they have been doing and actually that we can understand how things can actually move forward. And thank you very much, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're all looking forward to that. Is there any other questions? Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Sir Bob. I did manage to attend your session and I found it useful. I guess I'm interested in the term you use, local councillor, because certainly on some of the schemes that you're looking at and that we need to look at, they are strategic for the authority, they're strategic for employment around the whole area, or in the case of say, Wessex Fields, around health and research and the university. And so I think it's really important that that you include those councillors that are interested actually in the topic, because it's not necessarily just the immediate ward councillors. I think we've come unstuck on some of that previously where it's been a bit too parochial, frankly. The other thing that I think is really key, and I know it's been talked about, and again, I don't like the terminology charrette. I'm not sure I really like the terminology meanwhile used, but there's something about some of these blocks of land that have been empty for a very long time and what we can do to get good value for the public in the meantime from at least parts of the land. And a good example of that is the path in Hamworthy that links through from Rigler Road. That's a new and well-used footpath cycleway that's part of the strategic development, but you could just say, well, we can't do that because it's going to interfere with the land. So I think the more we can look to what we can do in the short term to get some value on the ground for people, the better. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Hagley, okay, good to see you. Hope your voice will be okay.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And Lord Kerslake, thank you for your introduction. I enjoyed last week's meeting. Just a very good discussion. To listen and hear the views. I think it's really welcome what you're saying about the transparency and the governance. And I think honestly, I think people have shown a good amount of patience and support with future places so far. I think there has been. I think we've reached that point, and I think you've alluded to it, where I think actually now something needs to come forward in terms of more transparency and the governance you've been talking about. And I made a mention last week about the quarterly meetings, and it may need to be, well, when I say more often, it may need to be as needed, and that may be in the shorter term more frequent than quarterly, but as needed will be just fine. And I think last week's was the start of those meetings, and in the lead up to outline business cases, there may be a need for a bit more dialogue rather than less, and then I'm sure it will settle back into a steady routine, which probably is quarterly. But thank you.
Okay. Any other members? I can't see anyone else indicating. So yeah, thanks, Anne. I really appreciate your time for coming along, and I think I'll take that up with colleagues regarding the quarterly meetings, future places, and how that would fit into the place committee, and see if we can work out a system of doing that. And I think just to shadow what everyone else has been saying, we're just really looking forward to those projects coming to fruition, in January, or starting to come to fruition from January onwards. Again, thanks for your time, and hopefully we're seeing a lot more of you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's it. Take care. Enjoy the rest of you. Thanks very much for coming. We appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, members. Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is the impact on services within the remit of the Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is to do with the budget. And we've got actually the leader of the council, Drew Miller, here, and also Jess Gibbons, who's the director. So good to see you. So I'm not sure who wants to kick off. I suppose Drew, I imagine we'll go first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair, and evening committee. So yes, this is effectively we've well versed to some extent in the overarching challenges we're facing. Just recap on them. Since we set our budget in February, we've had what we think are around about £25 million of cost of living pressures in year, and we're anticipating that rising to £30 million of pressures for next year, which is a huge amount. It's effectively around about 10% of our budget annually, and that's a very difficult amount for a local authority to fix in year and going forward. So just really commend. There's been a huge amount of work since the late summer with Cabinet and CMB. So officer colleagues and Cabinet colleagues, we've done what I think is a strong job moving that, displaying how we can balance that budget for next year, but also how we are able, one of the only authorities I'm aware of in the country that's actually able to deliver a surplus in year at the moment. So we're projecting around about £8.8 million surplus. I've been here, I think this paper's here specifically to talk about, the place remit and operations in general. So if I perhaps just give a bit more introduction on that, and then bring Jess in, and then very welcome any questions really. So some of the things we've looked at, particularly in and around the place and operations work streams, is looking at how we can be more commercial. We've looked and discussed how we can update our charging policy so it more accurately reflects inflation. Key message in there for us has been, if we don't effectively raise our prices for services people are taking, then they're being subsidised by the general taxpayer, which we don't think is right. So we're looking to bring some inflationary price rises across our service. We've also done some interesting work and are doing more around full cost recovery. So being a bit more commercial about how we're effectively looking at the pricing of our services in recognising all of the costs that goes into them. So there's been some really good work, and this work will continue through to January, effectively, where we'll be looking at some of those, and that has had a positive impact on the budget. Some of the things we're looking to do differently. The officers, have been liaising with wider stakeholders and internally about how we can actually change how we actually deliver some services. So there'll be some, hopefully some savings we'll look to bring forward. And I think we said in the paper that went through full council recently, we've now got some clarity in terms of where we're looking to make some of those adjustments. Now the work streams is to deliver those and do the work to test them those assumptions effectively. So that work's ongoing, both internally and with external stakeholders. one thing that's really important, I think this is sort of where we are now in the process, is it's a consultation piece we're doing. So we and I actually don't have a date in front of me, but we're just launching a wide-ranging public consultation, which I believe is a 6-week consultation to get some really good feedback. That's going to be a mix of qualitative feedback sessions. So we're really trying to do that well to get some more detailed feedback around budget and budget choices from our residents. From a member's perspective, we've got the budget cafe in December, which we would look for to provide a bit more detail of some of the potential savings and restructurings and assumptions around income. So we really welcome all members' attendance in that, where we will be displaying some of the figures in more detail and getting that member feedback. And then obviously, Chair, we've got the full budget overview and scrutiny process in February. So at that point, we'll have as is normal, we'd have landed effectively on a line-by-line basis what we're doing with the budget, and would be clearer in terms of the place impact there. We've been really clear as an administration that place is a priority area for us. You've just heard from Lord Kerslake and a huge amount of work that Future Places are doing, and I just genuinely believe that will be beneficial for the conurbation. But that's about driving our place forward, recognising how great an area we've got and how we need to effectively invest in place and prioritise place. So that's where we are as a council. We put, as you'll be well aware, significant extra money into items and operations like cleaner, greener, safer. So that's been successful, and we very much through this budget process going to try and protect our place expenditure and just be more ambitious about how we can deliver some services differently. But we're absolutely adamant we've got an amazing place and we need to keep investing in, not stopping. We are in a good position comparatively nationally. We've come into this cost of living pressure after going through local government reorganisation, which has saved us in the region of £50 million already. Councils who don't already have those savings are really struggling in the year and are looking much more challenging next year. And our 4-year medium-term financial plan looks much stronger going forward because of the future transformation savings we've got as well. So we're in a fortunate position as we go into this. It should mean that we should, as long as we do the diligent work that we are doing, we should be able to protect, some of those vital services. There will be some difficult things we'll have to do, as all councils have to do. We're now working up the detail, and we look forward to sharing that more in the future. Chair, one thing I'll just touch on briefly as well. So I've actually just talked a lot about budget, next year. We've done some interesting work. The officers have led some very interesting work in the year, how we can drive some effectively efficiencies, and that's delivered quite a large amount of our ability to create surplus in year. So commend the place work that's gone into that. Items like we've got some additional leisure income from BH Live. We've achieved really positively across of our events and seafront space. So mainly catering and our arcade performance, etc. So there's been some real positivity in that in year. And there particularly we've had some movement. Most of the movement we've had from inflation and from the macroeconomic environment has been negative for us as a council. But in terms of the recycler price and waste income, that's actually been really quite materially positive. So we've had some good positives in. We've also had a budget positive in terms of it's very difficult to recruit. So if we put in the region of £3 million into the cleaner, greener, safer investment, well, we've underspent there effectively because we're just unable to recruit into all of those roles. So that's actually a real challenge for us as an organisation and many others. So very happy, Chair, to talk about any of those in-year points in more detail, or about the overarching budget approach as we go up to build that budget up through the consultation and member engagement exercise with the budget cafe. So, Chair, probably best if I stop there and maybe invite Jess in to see if there's anything you'd like to add, and then we'd be delighted to take any of your questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Drew. I'm not sure there is a huge amount I can add to that because not speaking for a while. I've got croaky voice now. There's not a huge amount I can add to that. You know, that is the approach we've been taking in terms of how can we really commercialise, as Drew said, ensure we're getting full cost recovery as far as possible, ensuring we're really sweating our assets, improving the fees and charges, people paying where they can afford to do so, consolidating. And then the bit that I think is really critical now is that engaging with our communities, engaging with our stakeholders and partners, because we do know now is the time that actually working in partnership, collaborating together is going to be more important than ever before, and you know, and actually driving that through is going to be critical for us to not only deliver the council's budget but support our communities as well and maintain our brilliant place that we've got. So I'm very happy to answer these questions in terms of that overview, and any more detail in terms of that in year, where we are, and how we're managing to trying to push to deliver that underspend in year to support future years' budgets as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Jess. Okay, I mean, I think it's really important for everyone to consider the inflationary pressures on everybody at the moment, whether it's you're a business or a family or an individual, but also as a council. Actually, there's been some strong work going on for that with BCP to address that. Is there any members would like to ask any questions on that? Councillor Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Drew, and thank you, Jess. I'm looking at the Finance Strategy Update Report, 26th of October, and the executive summary, because I'd just like some clarification on this aspect of the capitalisation direction. It's obviously been somewhat held because of the changes in government and Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Do you have any further advice for us about where we sit with this proposed capitalisation direction, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, absolutely happy to talk about that. So effectively, we've got a transformation programme, which that is in the region of about £60 million that we need to fund. So we've asked we were originally going to fund that through the Beach Out SPV. We've now not unable to do that. So we're looking to the government offered us a capitalisation direction in year. So that would have been about £20 million for in this year, and we've got a minded to letter, which means these civil servants have worked hard on it, and ministers have approved it in principle, effectively, which is great because that gives us a good, that's a good backstop position. Our view, and I think it's been positively received with Deluxe, is that it's great. We can borrow from the government to do that, and just to be clear, that's purely to fund capitalisation expenditure. So it's got absolutely nothing to do with our revenue budget. So effectively, we can do that. We've also still got traditional flexible use of capital receipts, and we're saying, and Deluxe have been pleased for us to say that before we confirm, we'd like to take that capitalisation direction. Are we able to generate some of those sales ourselves? And that's an important thing for us to do. So we're working through that now. The MTFP has been prepared on the basis of us generating flexible use of capital receipts rather than a capitalisation. So I think that informs where we are in terms of thinking. An option is somewhere in the middle of that. So if we don't hit the target on a full target on capital receipts, then there's an option to have a balance of the transformation expenditure in capitalisation. So that's effectively where we are, Councillor Brooks. So we're still in the position where we have a confirmed minded to letter. That's where government are on it. We're in regular dialogue about our likelihood or want to take that. My view is we should stand on our own 2 feet on it if we can, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks, Drew. Councillor Brooks, anything else? Are you happy?
Yes, thank you, Drew, for what is a clear position, I think, I would say, where we are at the moment, because things seem to be so flux at this time as the government gets itself re-established and actually starts to tomorrow set out in financial terms where as a country we're going. So I think in my respect, it's a case of watch this space going forward. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I've got Councillor Lawton and Councillor Rigby. Councillor Rigby.
Evening, Drew. Just a quick question. How confident are you that we'll end up with a balanced budget or one in surplus?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Sibley. You know, in terms of what we know now, we're 100% confident that we'll end up with a in-year surplus. We didn't know, you know, that the cost of living pressures were going to hit us. So, effectively, so that is said with the caveat of what we know now. In the wider environment, we are 100% confident that the work that's been done will deliver a surplus in year, and quite a material one. And I think that's really important because it enables us to look forward to the budget we'll be setting in February with some confidence, because if we without a surplus going into that, it would make that budget setting process more challenging. So we're 100% confident that we'll be able to deliver that on what we know now. And you know, and I'm also not aware of very many other upper tier local authorities are doing that. So I just have to again commend the work of CMB colleagues and their officers for good management of their budgets, good commercialisation, which is setting us apart from quite a lot of our contemporaries.
Thanks, Drew. Councillor Lawton, happy with that?
That is good news. Thank you for that, Drew. It is good news in terms of a balanced budget, but certainly one that is in a surplus is really, really good news. I mean, listening to the news yesterday, there's a number of councils up and down the country who are on the verge of bankruptcy. So it's a good work by obviously yourself, but obviously by our financial officers as well. And I'd like to thank them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mann, just to go back to your opening remarks when you were doing this, and just a couple of things that you were saying, and hopefully asking you a couple of yes or no questions. The first one is around a couple of things that you said that came up a few times. Commercialisation of services and changes in delivery of services. That sounds suspiciously to me that we're going to be asking residents to pay for things which they're not used to paying for, or paying more for services which they may not be paying that much for at the moment. And the consultation piece sounds a lot like we're going to be going out and asking residents whether or not they'll be happy to pay for services or accept cuts. Is that the intention of what you're going to be doing? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mallory, happy to come back?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's slightly more than yes or no, but as I can, Chris. So effectively, there is, and I'll say none. You know, very limited, if any, areas we're looking to do new, you know, new charging for. So that's not what this is about. So this isn't asking about residents to pay for things they currently don't have to. We are saying, and hopefully I was clear with it. We are asking across our departments, you know, to look at inflationary price rises. That's not something that a council typically does. You know, there's quite, you know, if I could be so blunt, some intermittent charging across services, and we're saying in this environment when we've got some, you know, budget to balance for next year, and we're under such significant pressure, it's only right for everybody that those people who actually, you know, choose to take services, generally the two answers to this question: no to new charging, yes to inflationary charging. The point about the consultation, in terms of, I think, you know, I've got a slightly broader view of it myself, really. So we're not specifically asking people, you know, where do you want us to make some cuts? We're saying what are your priorities, what's important to you, and we're trying to do it in a bigger way than we would normally. We are making some choices, you know, and we need to make sure that the residents' voice is right at the heart of those choices. So we've got enough time to do it, so we should do it. So I'm just going to be very happy to, you know, let our really good you know, Lisa in our engagement team, you know, is running a fantastic process there, and we'll look forward to her doing that. So I think, as all of us, we play that feedback back across the membership as well. So it's not something we'll just keep internally. I think that's information we should all have as we're looking forward to, you know, deciding on our budget approach and what we want to support. So, Chris, hope that was a brief enough answer.
Thanks, Drew. Councillor Rigby, would you like to come back for anything?
Yeah, thank you. It's nice to know that there's not going to be new charges. I am seeing the consultation piece. It'll be nice to see what goes out and what comes back. Obviously, you've said as well, there's difficult things that we're going to have to do as you as the administration, we as the council. You know, we have got choices to make, and I'd just hate to see like a consultation piece being used as a way to pass the buck to the residents and say, well, that's what you chose in a consultation. We need to own these decisions, and I hope we'll be doing that going forward. Cheers.
Thanks, Councillor.
Absolutely.
Okay. Moham, I think we had you next.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you, Chair. Drew, hi, evening, and Jess, good evening. just on the engagement, would you say over the Christmas parking in town centres, would you say yes or no, the engagement went well?
Yeah, really clear. That's put together. I've had conversations with, Bournemouth Beard, had conversations over the Christchurch Mayor. Apologised on both of those occasions for the fact that there was no consultation or engagement about that. That's wrong. The one caveat around that is we are asking our officers to work at such pace around this, but it's a hands up that was not handled well. That is not how we should be doing business, and I personally very much want to apologise to anybody for the consultation and level of engagement on that wasn't good enough.
Okay, can I just thank you, just go on.
Yeah,
on this word commercialisation, and I think we all of us in a sense know what the word means, but it does have a very, very sort of strong arm context around it when it's a monopoly supplier, which is the council for most of the things that we're talking about. And it's about, I think I'm alluding to some things that Councillor Rigby was mentioning, where some things were not explicitly in the baseline of what people thought they were getting with their council tax, but kind of tacitly was there. And it's about generally sort of the quality of living and civil living here. And what we're doing is we're actually just kind of breaking a pattern completely by arguing a philosophy, which is actually, no, if you kind of pay separately for it, whether it's car parking, beach huts, various other things, green bin, etc. Now suddenly we're going to increase the price, and I'm hearing from you sort of like, what's to argue with? There's nothing to argue with. I think there is. I think there very, very much is. These are actually very, very, very acute political choices actually being made here about what are communally provided goods for the residents, for visitors to BCP, for our businesses as well, and which ones, in a sense, we're now going to, under the pressure of money, we're going to start thinking about completely differently, and we're going to raise the prices as high as we can, with the elasticity, of course, of demand as well. Just what's your feeling about that, please? Do you think I'm wrong on that? I'd love to know what kind of discussion has happened over this, please.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Am I able to? Thank you. Yeah, look, exactly the type of question and discussion we should be having. My view very much is that commercialisation protects those key civil expectations. We have a raft of things that aren't statutory. If we weren't, being commercial and had the opportunity, as we do with a fantastic seafront, visitor economy, to charge for parking, and if you just look actually what we've achieved on the seafront this year, we put a lot more into it. The pop-ups, the Festival Coast Live, the barbecues we put on, we put more activation down there, and we've got more money out of all of the concessions along there as well. So it's by being commercial that we're able to then save and secure those things that are really, really important that aren't statutory services. If we didn't have that, or hadn't done that, we'd be in a very difficult position. If you look at the media coverage nationally, people are looking at cutting absolutely everything. We're not in that position. We've got some difficult choices. We talk about them in more detail as we go through. But because we're so effectively, I'm trying to argue the same point as you. Because we're doing that, we protect those very services. And I just refer you back to the answer I made to Chris, Councillor Rigby. We aren't looking at doing a raft of new charges or charging things people aren't expecting to, and we aren't looking to put prices up to an absolute maximum. What we're trying to do is to say the prices should increase by inflation as a starter. Otherwise, everybody, the people funding all of those civil expectations aren't being fairly charged effectively. They're subsidising somebody to choose to take a service. You're right. These are acute political discussions. That's absolutely what we should have, and I welcome them. It's one of the reasons why it's really important to go and do a consultation. It's why we brought in things like the budget cafe, which hadn't happened historically, because we feel like we need to understand what we should be doing with those. But yes, so I agree. We need to protect the things that civil expectations. But the way to do that is to make sure we're being commercial, we're being efficient, and that's the way we'll be able to protect them. And we are not looking at charging a raft of new charges for everybody. So hopefully that gives you some assurance.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Mayor. Councillor Mayor, do you want to come?
And there's just one more, please. Is just about the capitalisation direction, the 20 million offer from the government. There's something here that I think we absolutely need to nail, because this came up at the overview and scrutiny for corporate community. And to your point about, oh, it can only be used for capital items. And I remember it came to the Section 4151 officer in the room, and I'm certain, okay, he isn't here to address it now, I don't think. I'm certain that he clarified that capitalisation direction money can be used for revenue expenditure, for operating expenditure. It's a ring fence thing, it's a special thing, and it can be. I can see you're shaking your head, Jess. Unless anybody can absolutely tell me I'm wrong, I'm sure I heard that correctly in the meeting, and we can go back to the minutes. Here's my question. My question is, are we certain we're making the right choice, or you're making the right choice to plan our budget for next year without making use of the £20 million? Because the only way that's going to be done is by more cuts than otherwise would be necessary.
Thanks, man. Sorry, Jess, did you indicate you wanted to come in for that? Or was that Drew? Sorry.
Just can come in. It was me indicating Jess can come in and give a more technical answer as probably is the way. So there is a looser description around capitalisation directions than there is under flexible use of capital receipts. It's quite restrictive under flexible use of capital receipts, but we can affect it. But so regardless of that, and I know Graham's on the call as well. So if Adam isn't, then if he wants to come in, that will be probably be helpful. But we are not looking under any circumstances of using any of that freedom and flexibility on that anything other than through to deliver the transformation expenditure. We don't need to either, because we've said we're actually in a position where we're balanced and better for this year. We've got a means to getting to a balanced budget next year. Do I think that we should be putting services up, but that people choose to buy by inflation rather than borrowing debt from the government? Absolutely, I do. And so even if that was an answer, so actually, thank you, Graham. I see you've indicated, so perhaps you would like to clear up that technically.
Yeah, if that's helpful, Chairman.
Yeah, of course, Graham. Please come in.
Okay, thanks. So I'll just say, if we just step back from it, what we've got to do is we've got to fund the revenue budget, which needs to be from ongoing revenue sources, etc. And we've got to fund our transformation programme. Now, our transformation programme, we have capitalised everything we can easily capitalise. The rest of it, you would normally have to fund from revenue programme. But what the flexible use of capital receipts regulations did was it allowed us to fund transformation costs from capital receipts. So that's what we were planning to do. What the capitalisation direction does is effectively steps in the place of the capital receipts as an option, and allows you to capitalise only effectively the transformation costs. That's the case that we put to government. That's effectively what they've offered us. So if we did take the capitalisation direction, it wouldn't help us with balancing the revenue budget. It would only help us with balancing the costs of, or paying for the costs of transformation, which either need to come from revenue or from capital receipts under the flexible use of capital receipts rules. So I think if you separate the two issues and look at them separately, then what the leaders just said is actually what we're trying to do is to sell assets, therefore we can fund the transformation programme under the flexible use of capital receipts if we can. If we can't achieve that, then we'll fund that from the capitalisation direction. And it might be a balancing figure. It might, I don't think it's 20 million or nothing. It might be that we can sell some assets this year, but not the full amount, and therefore we'll draw down. And I think it's about the amount you draw down of the capitalisation direction, which is anything from 0 to 20 million. So we're putting it in place so we've got it as security. We'll aim not to draw it down because we'll be able to sell non-core, non-strategic capital assets. And then in future years, we would try and use flexible use of capital receipts in the way that we would have done, which is to look at the value of assets if we can. So I think separating the two might help the committee in seeing that, if that's helpful.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Drew. That's really concise answer. That's really helpful. I've just got to confirm the next lot of speakers. We've got Councillor Bartlett, Councillor Brooke, Councillor Hadley, and Councillor Nigeria at the end. Unfortunately, we're finishing off there. If I can just remind members, obviously it's important that we just keep within the boundaries of place. I know we're talking some very important issues, but if we can just stay within the boundaries of place, that would be fantastic. So, Councillor Bartlett, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates, I've actually got 3 questions, Chair. On page 23 on subparagraph O, service rationalisation, talks about consideration of services that the local authority is not required to provide and any expenditure on services that it is required to provide, which is above the statutory minimum. So there must be some services that we're currently over providing, statutory services we're over providing one way or another, which we possibly could cut back. So if that is the case, which ones are we thinking about? And then the other question there is, you know, those services that are not statutory that we are providing, you know, are we? Which ones are those? Now, I think Leader has just suggested that, you know, the commercialisation of the services that are not statutory is a good thing, but this seems to counter that argument in some way. That, in other words, that some services we're providing, we don't have to, that probably aren't cutting edge financially. So we must have some ideas of what those services might be. I don't know. Is that one for you, Leader, or is it one for Jess?
Oh, Councillor Miller.
Perhaps I'll just start and frame. You know, I'm not going to go into detail, but you know, happy to talk about detail in terms of this year. But effectively, you know, in any normal budget setting process, there's a myriad of change between you know, the MTFP in August to the MTFP in February. So in terms of, you know, so I can talk about the principle, and in terms of the principle, you know, we are, part of the process has been looking at the services we're doing. That you know, we've done some really good benchmarking data across the you know, the local government environment. We spend significantly more money on, you know, stuff like cleaning, greener and safer effectively. So we should look at that. We should look at understand, you know, are there different ways of providing that? But ultimately, the decisions we will make politically on that, both as an administration and then ask for council to support us, I think it's quite clear they're exactly the type of services that we have been prioritising, that we will want to protect, because we do believe that Bournemouth, Christchurch and Paul's are a great area. So happy, you know, we can talk in a bit more specifics about, I guess, in year, because that's happened, but I'm not going to project forward about what things we might or might not do in February. You know, we've got a budget cafe and the February round of overview and scrutiny for that. Anybody else is welcome to come in, but that's, I think, you know, an answer I wanted to, you know, want to give in terms of the main part of both of those questions.
Thanks, Drew. Councillor Bartlett, just very much, I think we've only got the lead. It's, you're available till 7 o'clock, Drew, isn't it? So we just need to be pacey. Yeah. So we just need to be pacey with our questions, please, members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to touch on the capitalisation of staff currently employed on the transformation programme. I see we've got 6.7 million staff costs apportioned to the transformation programme. So there's a lot of people working on transformation. I don't know how many staff that equates to. There must be an awful lot of people. And 2 elements to this question. What are they actually doing? And when we come to the end of the transformation programme, does it mean those staff will be made redundant because they've been employed on transformation? And what is the impact of using that large number of people on the transformation programme on the ability to deliver services?
I'll let that question go. I just want to keep on place at the moment. So I think we keep with that question, but I'm fearing that we may.
With respect, Chair, that does impose on the ability to provide services related.
Okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I just want to keep the committee concise. So, Councillor Murray, did you want to come back to that one?
Yeah, great, and I'll try and be concise on my answer, Chair. Thank you. Effectively, I just say that because we've got the transformation programme, because we've got LGR savings, you know, that's why we're in a much stronger position than other local authorities. So you know, let's value and cherish and see what transformation is doing for us. Technically, Councillor Bartlett, the point around the 6.7 million, that's not a group of people that are purely doing transformation services. That's largely all of the council officers, but their percentage of time that they're spending on transformation. This is a huge project, and it has taken up a huge amount of officers' time all through the organisation. Obviously, much more weighted towards the most senior and those specifically in transformation roles. But it's a normalised way of reflecting how you capitalise time in projects like this. So that's effectively the percentage time across the organisation that has been spent on on transformation rather than a transformation team. Just one further thing I will add about transformation more generally is that, you know, what we're doing in terms of our staff, we've actually front loaded a lot of the cost effectively, because we want to effectively build a resource in our teams. So we've asked our SIT partners to come in early in the programme and work in a way that builds talent and builds ability in our teams to continue a continual performance improvement culture, which we're driving forward. So our teams will, you know, any good organisation should be spending time transforming across the organisation. It's obviously going to be less time and less cost, you know, as we move forward, the main bulk of it. But it's a really important thing to say we're building that talent, that resource in our business, in our local authority, which will keep us improving and being efficient going forward. I hope that was clear, Chair.
Jess, already indicated. Thanks.
Yeah, I just thought it might be helpful if I bring that alive a bit in terms of what we've been doing this year in terms of very much the operations and the place space, because the transformation programme is absolutely critical for us in terms of how efficiently and effectively we operate our services. We've been doing a lot of work in environment, in housing, in planning, and in transport and engineering. They're starting work in terms of looking at our systems and processes and how we can really modernise ourselves to be that cutting-edge council. We are on that journey. Some things are already in place, some things are on their way, a lot coming through in the next 6 months, which will really change the way teams can work and how effective they can be on the ground, which, while that's having an impact this year, that will also help us be really robust and strong for future years. So I think it is important, and it will change our efficiency and effectiveness in terms of how we operate across the operations directorate and delivering our services on the ground to our residents.
Thanks, Jess. Councillor Brett, I think we need to move on now, so everyone remember.
Sorry, I have another question, Chair. I did say I had 3 questions.
Yeah, we've had 2 cracks. Okay, I'll let this go, but we need to be, you know, we need to move on after this one. Okay, so yeah, Councillor Bottom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the transformation savings for 23-24 assumes a £10 million worth of savings on a third of party spend. Now, that will, I guess that will impact on spend on the provision of services or contractors associated with the provision of services and place services, but they're not itemised. We don't know where that £10 million is coming from. Have we moved on to a point where we can yet identify where those savings are coming from?
I think you've maybe already answered that, Councillor Miller, but if you want to come back to...
Yeah, I will change. It's not particularly relevant to place, but the effectively, so you know, we're putting in back office systems that would allow us to track every pound that we're spending as an organisation, which gives us much more ability to control effectively how things are procured across the organisation. So we're trying to come out of this silo working where individual departments would go and spend some money. We're actually, you know, it's a pretty obvious, you know, thing, economies of scale, buying power effectively. If we can buy as BCP rather than as a small department, then you know, and it's those types of savings that we look to make. Those savings, we haven't touched those savings since we came in. So this is the transformation plan that we've all signed up to at different points. Effectively, now's the point to deliver those savings. Anecdotally, you know, the spending restriction we've got on, where Adam and I have to meet to approve anything over a certain amount. Even though the budget is effectively balanced for, you're showing balance of 23-24, we've decided to keep that in place because it's proving really, really helpful in terms of identifying where money is being spent across the organisation, where it should be in a procurement a centre of excellence rather than procured individually. So we're doing that until we've got the MRP, the back office system in place to resource that. We're keeping that in place, or certainly for the time being as well, because it's being useful. So will be a challenge, you know, all of these are, you know, but it's effectively that's what the plan has been, the transformation plans. We should be able to get economies of scale, and we should be able to get better buying power, better, more, you know, organised and larger organisations. So that's the plan, Chair, always has been.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Brooke. Just very much, just to remind members also to keep everything in the context of place, and also we've got limited time while the leader's got a family commitment at 7, so if we can make our questions, you know, as pacey as possible, that'd be great. Thank you.
I have a number of questions and comments to make, and
I apologise if I go beyond 7 o'clock, but as this is a scrutiny committee, we have every right to continue to scrutinise the topics. Can I pick up first of all on, I suppose, really something about the air show? Can you tell me how much, I know this is not in the paper, but it's relevant, how much it cost this year to put on the air show as far as the council is concerned, and what you building into the budget for either in revenue or capital for next year's air show, the date of which you've already fixed. And the third part of that question is, and what savings are you making between the cost this year and next year, and what will those savings be based on?
Sorry, Councillor Miller. Okay.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll let come down more into the specifics. Again, I'm going to be clear. I'm not talking about what's in the budget for next year. That's a process we're going through. What I can say is we're committed to the air show. Absolutely. I think it's a good example, actually, Mike. In terms of the discussion we're having with stakeholders, because we're saying, look, we really want to deliver this. We're going to deliver it, but are there different ways, of securing finance or commercialising it? So we're having that discussion. We don't know where that lands effectively. That's why we need to wait and see. But we're 100% committed to an air festival. Partners are absolutely committed to working with it effectively. In terms of what we spent on it this year, that will be something which we'll either have to hand or I can get to you immediately. But hopefully that clarifies the position in terms of the air festival next year and our approach to it.
I'm afraid it doesn't answer the question. It doesn't answer the question at all. I've asked for some specifics. You're head of finance. You should be able to provide those specifics.
No, I think what Councillor Miller was saying that he hasn't got information. He was going to pass it to you via email, written context. But I don't think that's unreasonable. Can you move on to the next question, Councillor?
No, I'm sorry, Chair. We are supposed to be scrutinising. We have the right to ask the questions.
But that
is a perfectly fair question to ask.
To be honest, and you've got a fair response that
I haven't. No, I haven't had the question
well,
answered.
I think you have. So what's the leader said that he'd give you a written response to that. She hasn't got that information,
It wasn't to the whole question. The written response that he said he would provide.
So what was the other part of the question you felt that wasn't answered?
Well, he should know what amount is in the budget for next year, because it's already a balanced budget, we are told, and therefore he should know what that figure is. He's head of finance. If it is different from this year's total, he should know what savings have been made and how he's making those savings through the air show. And that applies to things like the crematorium as well. If we're not getting that information, then I'm sorry, but he's failing to, and you are cutting scrutiny short by insisting that we can't ask questions like this or answers are going to be given later.
Councillor Miller, do you want to come back with that?
Yeah, just context a little bit there, but yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just to be really clear, it's not the point of this today to go through the detailed presentation of what the budget will be in February. It never has been. Mike, you've been a councillor for even longer than I have, and we do not get that detailed information until further down the line because it changes regularly. We're working with it. I've been very clear about that. What I have said is, in terms of giving you information on what the air show costs us this year, I will get back to you by email very happily.
Right, I will certainly accept that last point. However, it does raise, his response does raise another question. He says that everything is changing, it's all fluid. Therefore, how can we know the detail? And yet he said he is 100% confident that there will be a balanced budget. Now, how can you be 100% confident that there will be a balanced budget when A, things are going to be changing all the time, and you've got to set the budget at a particular point in time. B, you've got a whole list of unidentified savings for which we know absolutely nothing, and we need to see whether you're starting to identify those and where they will come, whether they revolve around redundancies or whether they revolve around cuts in income and so on, or the actual services. And the same applies, you've identified savings that can be made through efficiencies, but we've already seen that you failed to make efficiencies in some areas, especially in the transformation programme. So how can you be 100% certain that you will have a balanced budget with all the detail there that is required and that it can be implemented? So, Leader, I'll let you come back, but I know you've answered this already, but you want to come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's sort of relatively personal slight, so I appreciate the opportunity to come back. A few things in that. What I've said is I'm 100% confident on we will deliver a surplus of budget in this year. So let's just be really clear about that. You're asking me questions about what the budget will be next year. I'm also 100% confident we'll deliver a balanced budget in the February paper next year, because that's our legal requirement to do so. So we will have a balanced budget this year and in next year. Just to give you some comfort, and Councillor Brooke, he's playing politics. He's well aware that we don't go through this level of detail at this stage. And as I've said before, to give every committee, confidence, our section 151 is positive and content about the process. Dealer car, what we're doing is just more detailed work than we've done normally at this stage of the year, and we will look forward to delivering a really positive budget. The reason I'm able to be really confident about the air show is because that's something we're really committed to doing, because we are committed to delivering for place, and that's a really strong event that we were committed for. And we haven't not delivered on transformation expenditure. What we've done is the budget we inherited had a £15 million staff cut, which because there was no other solutions. Staff cut before we'd done any of the back office savings. We've managed to find savings and efficiencies across the organisation, so we didn't need to go forward with an inherited Unity Alliance slashing of staff when it wasn't ready. So we have a record of delivering, and we're going to keep delivering in terms of that. And Chair, thank you very much, and committee, thank you very much. But I apologise, I do have something to go to at 7 o'clock. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, so we move on to Jess. Are you right picking up anything the leader won't be able to pick up? So I think we'll move on to the next speaker, and Councillor Brooke, we'll also make sure you get your written answers to the questions that you asked regarding the air show. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yes. Well, for the record, interestingly, the slashes in staffing, as he suggested, was because we were going at transformation at a faster pace. But that said, as Councillor Einiger, I'm concerned about commercialisation and the expectation of providing services for the community, and that includes those people, children's services, and those who are not in a position to pay. And I don't just mean children's social care. I mean services to people who are potentially not in a position to pay for stuff, and our tourists and our businesses. But it's kind of interesting in terms of, if we are going commercialising our services, it's not all about maximum increase, because the car parking is a good example. I raised that with the portfolio back in July. What is the position for Christmas car parking? Because I was talking around the Poole Maritime Festival with the stakeholders there, and they were really keen to get clarity early. So the piece about being joined up, that's a really good example of silo working, where it was very last minute. It wasn't, I got no response from the portfolio at all. But we were friends to do that. Dorset have announced all the free car parking in rural Dorset. We need to try and encourage people to the area. I'm not a great fan of dragging lots of cars into the town centres, but I think there is something about being real about what we're doing and doing it early. But I'm pleased that the leader made an apology on that. The cremation area is an interesting one that I would like some answers from Jess on, really. We've got a loss of income of 600,000 in this report, and we also talked about service cost increases, and clearly there's an issue there about the price of gas in particular. But with Poole closed, and with Harbourview on stream, and New Milton service on stream, and the Pure service at Andover, there's obviously quite a lot of competition. So I wonder, in terms of our commercialisation, whether we feel we're in the right place in the market, firstly, and secondly, the commitment that was made by Cabinet to replacing the Poole crematorium included getting on now with some preparation work and with business cases to do that in the next 6 months. And I just wonder what work is underway and moving forward on that. I have got several more questions, but perhaps we could do that one first.
Jess, are you okay coming in that? I know the work on the crematorium is in early stages. It's quite fast paced, but if you can answer what you can, but we understand.
Thank
This
you,
is a
Chair. Yeah, no, I think that we have got the in terms of the Paul Creme, we have got the cabinet paper coming forward as we agreed following the last cabinet paper that came forward that would come through in February or March time, I believe, and that's going through the process. So it is early doors. It might actually be even January. It is early doors. It's being worked through. We're looking at, as we said we would, alternative forms of cremation, so electric cremators and that sort of thing. So that is happening, and that will inform how we look going forward. In terms of your questions about this year, which I can very much focus on in terms of the pressure in our crematorium, we have been, that is predominantly around energy price rises and the price of gas, which is expensive. We are very conscious of that, and the team have been working really hard to look at actually ways of being more efficient, ways of making sure we're marketing, ways of competing in that very competitive marketplace, which you're right, it is a competitive marketplace, but the team are doing an excellent job. And I think what's really exciting is, the launch of the pool new facility there. We've had a huge amount of bookings for people coming forward for their cemetery, for their events, and it's been and for their funerals, and that's been really well received by the community. So and that sort of work by the team, they've got we've got our bereavement service web pages that are advertising, we're marketing out there, they're doing a lot of work in that space, which is having a positive impact. But you're absolutely right, energy costs are hampering the service, and that's what's really impacted on us this year in terms of that deficit on that service line.
Thanks, Jess. And just to echo, what you've said about what the work they've done at the Pool Crematorium site and the bereavement services, they've done some great work out there, and that means a lot to a lot of people. Sorry, Councillor Hadley, you want to come back for your second?
That's great, thank you. Yeah. So the next one under environment was around sale of recycled materials, which I think, as was said, is a good news story in terms of the price, but it's not something we can rely on, I suppose, going forwards, because it does tend to fluctuate an awful lot. But I was interested in the sales of waste from the household recycling centres and the 100,000 there, which again is good. But new to you was a project a while back, and I was trying to find an update on that, and it seems that there's not been very much for quite some time in terms of selling stuff that's been brought to the tip and said, well, actually that could be reused, and clearly in the reduction, in the cycle of recycling, it should be reuse, repair, repurpose, and all those sorts of things before you hit recycling. So I'm interested in what we're doing to try and capture waste and avoid it becoming waste and get it reused. And part of that was New for You was only open on Saturdays, and I think it was because the staff there were volunteering to do it. So there's kind of something about getting that on a better footing. I think it also ties to something we've got later about waste, the other paper, in terms of how we can encourage better habits there. But so that was the second one under environment.
Thanks, Councillor Hadley. That was a good question about new to you. So thanks for that.
Thanks, Chair. No, thank you. So absolutely right in terms of the market conditions around the recycle. It's positive at the moment. We are obviously monitoring that really carefully. It is impacted not just by national events but by global events as well. But I think we do believe that's a direction of travel which will stay, probably maybe not always as high as it is now, but in a more positive direction. And we're obviously closely monitoring that all the time. In terms of the new to you, that is going continues to go really well, and you're absolutely right. We want to make sure people are buying secondhand, that we've got that full recycling process. And I know I was speaking recently to Ian Portney, who was talking about them trying to extend the number of days and even looking at new sites for it because it's been so successful. So those sorts of initiatives, and that's a sort of innovative approach where our values and behaviours are about innovation and being passionate about it, and the service certainly are passionate about that and being innovative in their approach.
Thanks, Jess. Councillor Hadley, and we're just short of time. I'll let you just come back once, and we really need to move on with that.
Thank you. I do have two other questions ready, but just on that one, obviously at the tip itself rather than in a separate building would be really useful, or in the town centres. In terms of street lighting, we're showing a saving, and I hope that's because we're dimming the lights or doing something. I'd be interested to know what that is to get that 132,000 saving. But I'm really concerned about the utilities price increase. Assumed 3.1 million. That's a huge assumption, I guess. And I guess the question is, how sure are we about that price increase being covered? Because obviously the utility prices are major concern to all business and all households, but particularly businesses because it's uncapped. How solid is that figure in terms of actually achieving that as our cap, I suppose?
So obviously, in terms of street lighting, the saving this year has been very much around putting in more efficient bulbs and all of those sort of things to make sure we're reducing our cost, and that has had a positive impact. In terms of going forward, we are looking at all of our options at the moment. What's the best way of us being able to reduce that cost, because it is a challenging energy price. And you know, we set out right at the start of this year looking at how we can address the rising energy costs, and we've got a plan in terms of mitigating that for this year, and we're working up those plans for future years.
Go on then.
Good. Just
I can't resist you.
A very quick one. Thank you, Chair. Just on destination and culture, BH Live, we've got an income of 200,000, which obviously is welcome because obviously they struggled and we had to help them out through COVID. But I was interested to read in the Echo that their income, they've made 500,000 profit. So I guess given it's a wholly owned company, I wondered where the rest of that's gone, and what the prospects are going forwards in terms of trying to ensure that we keep us surplus. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so Jess, sorry.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm afraid I know the detail of that. I know that we have, which is very positive, received the additional 200,000 from them, which is very much welcomed, and we are in regular conversation with them about how well they're operating and what's coming through. I don't know what that 500,000 referred to in the Echo is, but I can certainly go away and get some further information.
Councillor Bartlett, because I know you're trustee of BH Life, you might be able to answer that.
Might be able to answer that on my behalf.
Yeah, like I said, the financial arrangements are fixed for an agreement that was worked out between the council and BH Life during lockdown. So there's very specific profit share agreements that set the figure that the council gets. I'd just like to correct Councillor Hanley, it's not owned at all by the council. It's an independent charity. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Councillor Bartlett. That's very useful. Thanks, Councillor Hanley. We'll move on to Councillor Brooks. Last but not least.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be very brief. It's more of an observation rather than a question for Jess. It was mentioned by the leader, this aspect of benchmarking. It's so easy to be inward looking, but actually we should be outward looking and looking at other authorities along the coastline and of a comparable size to us as to the kind of charging regime. Commercialization seems out of a business management book rather than adjusting a price, to me, is what it's all about. So I think benchmarking does play an important part to explain how we stand with other authorities and other locations. Staycation and the last 2 or 3 years have shown that we've been overwhelmed with visitors. I would dearly like them to spend far more with us, and probably they're going to be prepared to spend a bit more with us because I hope that they keep on coming. But if in your consultations and your analysis, and then you come back, if you can give us some clear indication on benchmarking, I think that would really help. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Brooks. I'm not sure if you can come back to that, Jess, more a statement, but yeah. Okay, right. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Okay, thanks, Jess, for your time. So next, agenda item number 8, which is regarding fire breaks. So we've got the portfolio holder, Councillor Anderson here, and also supported by Martin Whitechurch, Simon Wilkins, and Stuart Gilliam from the fire service. So welcome, Stuart, and Paul. So welcome, Councillor Anderson.
Right, thank you, Chairman, to Mr. Whitchurch and his team, because they have a very extensive presentation to give to you, which should explain everything about this, and they are much better prepared and in a place to give it rather than me. So I'll hand over to Martin and his team.
Great, yeah, welcome, Martin. Thanks for putting the presentation together. I know a lot of us will be eager to see that. I know your presentation is always very good, so thank you.
First error, I had left the mute on. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, thank you, Chair, for the kind words as well. So yeah, grateful to be joined tonight by Stuart from Dorset Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service and Paul from Urban Heath Partnership, who I'll bring in a moment for a couple of slides for themselves. I'm going to share my screen for the presentation, and we'll go through this sort of fairly rapidly to get to question answers section at the end as well. So hopefully, if somebody can give me a nod that that's come through, and you can see it. Yep, great, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair.
Carry on.
Yeah, sorry, Mark, that's all fine.
Yep. Okay, thanks. So the request was to consider the current policy on wildfires following the large Camford Heath fire back in on the nature reserve back in April this year, and it's been so this kind of presentation and the report that is in the agenda papers is just kind of overviewing the work that goes in on the ground and with the community in terms of managing wildfire risk and the sort of the extensive work that we do with partners to kind of to manage that and sort of mitigate that. So as I'm sure you're all aware, a couple of visuals there of the damage done by the fire in Camford Heath on back in earlier in the year. So just over 16 hectares was burnt. Extensive response, around 35 appliances, over 100 personnel there. Many staff, including staff from BCP and the Urban Heath Partnership as well. And a range of equipment and kind of response to just obviously manage that as a significant risk to the local properties. You can see in that photo top right how close that came to those residents and the boundaries there. There's also been a couple of other notable sort of large fires this year on Studland, which completely closed off the Studland Peninsula for quite some time. And there's also another cliff fire at Boscombe Pier as well. Unfortunately, these are all too frequent, and we're quite used to managing them, unfortunately. And what I'll go through in the next few slides is kind of a response to that. So just in BCP this calendar year, we've had 101 individual sort of wildfires, mostly from barbecues and camps, and arson as well. And that's defined as any uncontrolled vegetation fire which requires some form of action to then get it under control and that suppression. So there's just some further visuals there on the Camford Heath fire. So it shows the extent of that sort of space that was under the fire and was then sort of brought under control. So I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's much better placed than I am in terms of just reviewing and sort of giving you a quick overview of the Urban Heath Partnership. You've got some stats and figures on the screen there. So Paul, I'll hand over to you for the next few slides.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yes, just to quickly what we do. We're delivering the heathland mitigation on behalf of the partnership. And that's across the BCP council area and the Dorset council area. The mitigation is required as part of development, so any development within 5 kilometres of the heathland has to put money towards this mitigation. We're delivering these strands here, which is education around heathland, monitoring of the heathlands, a Dorset Dogs project, and a Firewise project. Much of this is around wildfire reduction, which is what I'm just going to concentrate on the next couple of slides. So if we can go to the next slide, Martin, I'll start talking about the education. So the education programme that we have works with target schools that are close to the heathland sites across the BCP area. And the aim of that is to raise the awareness of the heathland habitat and the consequences of wildfire. So we've got some sessions that we deliver. So the Arson Courtroom Drama is for 12 to 13-year-olds, and that's a session where students enact a courtroom scenario around a heathland fire. So it's quite memorable for them because it's different to their normal lessons. So it gets the message across in a fun way. We've got a crime scene investigation, which is interactive. It's it can either be used online or in the classroom, but students work through a whodunit type scenario, again based around heathland fire, so and the consequences of that. We also target younger students, and we're looking at developing their understanding and being aware of the heathland habitat. So those are delivered through heathland themed sort of activities, either in the classroom or out on site. We're in an average year before the pre-COVID, we were getting through 4,500 students in the BCP area. that they would be receiving these sessions, and around 6,000 students overall. So there's quite a lot of children receiving those sessions. If we can go on to the next slide, Martin. So monitoring, a big part of our work is monitoring, and that can be the visitor numbers. So we get trends of the visitors that are going to the heathlands, and we can then use that to inform management. We also monitor incidents, and they're all recorded on a data set. That we have a program that we share, and we can look at what's going on. So that helps us to identify if there's patterns of fires and all incidents. This is just the visual there is just an example of one thing that we will monitor, and that's actually splitting down the fires between the sites across the area. And the stats in them may be slightly different than anything that comes from the fire service, because they do include campfires as well that the fire service may not have attended. So yeah, we also monitor the condition of the heathlands, and we use the key indicator species of the birds, which is the Dartford warbler, the woodlark, and the nightjar. So if you want to go on to the next slide, please. So Firewise project is a joint funded project between the Urban Heath Partnership and the fire service. Basically, it's raising the awareness of homeowners that are close to heathlands about how they can reduce the risks. The visual at the bottom is kind of a checklist, and it's very simple things that don't cost money, but it's just about reducing the risk of embers coming off of the heathland fire and catching things like dry leaves in gutters and those sort of things. So it's really just getting that information out there. And after the Camford Heath fire, we worked in partnership with BCP staff and the fire service to get that information out to the homes around that Camford area, just letting them know what they can do. So that was a big part of the work of Firewise. We're also delivering canine Firewise volunteer patrols, where we've got a group of volunteers that walk their dogs on the heathlands every day, or very regularly. So they are recording their walks and just reporting anything they see. So that might be fires or antisocial behaviour. And over the summer, we've had 600 patrols recorded, and that's over 650 hours of volunteer time. So that's a really good way of increasing our presence and just seeing what's going on out on the heathlands. Okay, so can we go to the next slide, please, Martin? Okay, so as I've said, a big part of our work is about wildfire reduction across the partnership area. So this is the first bit of work is working in partnership with land managers and the fire service, and you might hear a bit more about those, but land managers have kind of fed into access routes for the fire service to get there to help in big incidents, and areas are marked on these maps where not to go. They're marked in red, and access gates have all got codes so that they're easily recognisable, with stickers on those gates on the ground, so that actually we can get information to the fire services quickly of where it is. We work with the fire service really closely, and the fire control will send a text message to 10 land managers every time a heathland fire is called in. Those land managers then put that information onto a WhatsApp group where the information is spread across land managers in the area very quickly, and that can help us in the response and supporting each other. And to help with that support, there's a list of machinery and resources that the partners have got across the area that can be called in the event of a large fire to help. So that's very much part of that supportive across the area work that's really important in reducing the impact of the fires. The other thing that we do is, and if you've been out on the heathlands this summer, you may have seen big posters up. So we're trying to advise people not to have and let them know about that they shouldn't be having barbecues on heathlands. So that's been a campaign that's been on site and social media, which is very much another way of us getting our messages out. The hashtag Operation Heathland campaign is part of what you hear about a bit later, but that's been a social media campaign to raise the awareness of heathlands and to get everyone to respect and protect them. The other thing that we do in terms of that is in a large incident, we'll as a partnership help support each other in terms of what needs to be done after that incident. So in terms of damping down if there are hot spots on the heathland and wildlife rescues. So it's very much about a joint effort in reducing that impact. And in terms of the partnership support, that's going to continue. It's been agreed that the funding for 5 years, so the support for BCP will continue and will increase. It's not going to end. So yeah, thank you, Martin.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Sorry, flipped the slide a little bit too quickly, but thank you for that. It's really, really good detail. So going to hand over to Stuart from your side of things. Stuart, if you'd like to introduce yourself in terms of location and role and that sort of thing, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Martin. Hello, committee chair. My name's Stuart Gillian. I'm the group manager for BCP and that group of stations, Group 4. Been in position for a few years now. Yeah, exactly. I agree with all the comments made just now in terms of the support that's going to continue. There is a national campaign that we feed into as a fire rescue service in terms of the sort of looking at the national picture. Reports have been recently released from the NFCC, which is the National Fire Chiefs Council, in regards to wildfires and the actions taken. And unfortunately, Dorset and Wiltshire Fire Rescue is one of the busiest fire rescue services nationally in relation to wildfires, or fires in the open as they're sometimes called. So we are somewhat ahead of the game in terms of dealing with these sorts of incidents. But those defendable lines that proved so vital at the Camford Heath job, the incident back in April, those are the sort of things that we're looking at partners to support us with in terms of mitigation and access to those sort of areas. As the slide says there, we have a number of specialist appliances that pretty much all of those were at the Camford Heath job and the Studland, the recent Studland Peninsula job, and those appliances form part of our integrated risk management plan in terms of putting the right resources in the right locations, and that's something we will continue to do and replace those appliances as and when. We have a national tactical advisor, national wildfire tactical fire advisor. He that chap here, Andy Elliott, will attend most of our significant wildfire events, but he's classed as a national asset, so he will obviously lend his expertise to neighbouring fire rescue services and national fire rescue service reactions to wildfires. Just to give you a picture of, we've sort of mentioned a couple of statistics around wildfires. We've in January to October in 2021, in our service area, we attended 450 wildfires. Over the same period of 2022, January to October, we had 879. So that's a 95% or 93% increase in the number of wildfire events in the organisation. And if we pin that down to the BCP area, we've mentioned 101 incidents, and the latest data today was to suggest that January to October, 126 wildfires in the BCP area in 2021. And so far this year, January to October, 231, another over 80% increase in wildfires in the BCP area. So it's on an increase, and it sort of sits with the national picture as well. So the national picture of reportable wildfires, there's a set of criteria that needs to be met in terms of reporting a wildfire through the national reporting tool. And for reportable wildfires, in 2021, there were 247 wildfires reported. And so far, up to September the 5th this year, we've had 969 national events of recordable and reportable wildfires. And those reportable wildfires are significant events such as the Camford Heath type incident.
Lovely. Thanks, Stuart. That's really, really useful sort of national context as well. I think the quote that I've got on screen in that green box from Andy is kind of just really testament as well that we feel the strength of the Urban Heath Partnership really helps in sort of addressing this as a concern and in sort of the risk management approach to that. So Paul a minute ago mentioned the Operation Heathland. I think I urge you all to have a click on the link or have a look on the website at your sort of leisure. To just understand what work sort of goes into that in terms of the public messaging, and trying to sort of address what you've heard in terms of the issues with all that number of fires. I want to talk just with a couple of slides around what we do within BCP as a countryside service, countryside team in terms of managing these habitats. Obviously, the majority of them are SSIs, highly designated European level of designation, protected for their wildlife value. So what we try and do is sympathetically and at the right time of year manage them using specialist machinery like the cut and collect machines you see on the screen, using volunteers and contractors. So there's a whole mixed range of methods of managing the heathlands. And also understanding the ecology of the habitats to make sure we're doing the right cutting at the right time in the right place, and that sort of work. We've got a team of heathland mitigation wardens that work alongside Paul's teams and in the wider partnership, who are out on the ground trying to engage and educate and enforce where required the behaviours around not just fire but dog management and lots of other issues as well. So that includes daily patrols and information stands and events, guided walks and that sort of thing. And also managing all those volunteers that Paul talked around with a couple of those schemes, and in terms of those who help our site management as well. And obviously links into sort of social media and kind of publicity promotion as well. So the actual work is focused on the heathland. So obviously wildfires can happen anywhere, but they're most prevalent on the heathland because mostly down to the gorse and heather being highly flammable, and obviously especially with the summer like we had this year, the dry conditions and the risk level there therefore being really high. Wooded areas are less likely to have those fires because the volumes of sort of dry combustible material is less. And also those it's called the Urban Heath Partnership for a reason. It's about the proximity to those urban areas, like on the photos I showed you earlier. Most of our fire defendable management is undertaken in the winter, and then some are recutting where it's essential, and it's very much a risk assess sort of process, where we look at each site and each habitat in question and proximity to the housing, and we understand on a site-by-site basis what the risks are. We work with sort of Stuart and colleagues and Paul and colleagues to really have a detailed understanding of that with our site managers who to do that. And so that's an annual process. And that all feeds into the wider kind of resilience of the council, I suppose. And Simon's just come on screen at perfect timing. So thank you, Simon. I'll let you introduce yourself and you can run through these last couple of slides for us.
Hi, Simon.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. Thank you. My name's Simon Wilkins. I'm the Senior Emergency Planning and Resilience Officer for BCP Council. Obviously, our role within the emergency planning team is to look at the response and ensure we've got the capabilities and to respond within the council, and working with our emergency services and other partners to ensure the response goes as well as possible when a fire does occur within our patch. We've been working with the teams. A lot of the mitigation just been outlined within the environment team, and we've been looking at how to get that consistency across the BCP Council to support the destination culture locations like Upton Country Park, which there are risks associated with, and other locations. And also looking at putting in place a response plan for BCP Council, which is in a mature draft form at the moment, just putting the final parts in. So for next season, that'll be ready to go to look at the response side. We've also been working with our partners on the digital mapping side to ensure it's more accessible to officers within the council, not just those within the environment teams and others. So we've got that, and that will be going on a national website, secure website for partners to be able to access at all times as well. Obviously, the fire service already have this, but it's useful for other response partners such as the police and others to access as necessary. We were involved with a multi-agency debrief following the Camford Heath fire. A number of issues were identified on that, mainly about communication and notification. And in subsequent fire we've had this season, those were seen to be mitigated, and that notification happened much better, and the communication between the partners. That's not saying there wasn't communication and coordination within the Camford Heath, but the access to others as necessary to ensure that response happened as smoothly as possible has been improved since that point. In addition, we've written some Poole Harbour Island evacuation plans. I know Poole Harbour Island sit within Dorset areas, but the logistical side and the response is likely to come from the BCP area, supporting the fire service and others to get over there. And we've already identified from doing that work and other risk assessments we've carried out, we've got to do a similar process for the Studland Peninsula following the fire there, and also Henglesby Head, due to the fact that if the wind direction and the fire is in the wrong location there, people could get cut off there, and we will need to evacuate across to Muddyford area in that location. So there's a lot of work been going on. There's still a lot to do from our point of view with the planning side for response, but that should be all in place for next season.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon. Chair, that brings to an end the slides and the presentation. So welcome, to opening that up as required, really.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks to everyone that's put together, been part of that process, putting that presentation together. And I think, on behalf of myself and all the councillors and Councillor Moore, representing Camford Heath, thanks for all the work you did regarding the fire on the Heath. I think everyone did a grand job and obviously saved those households, which is the most important thing. I've just got a couple of questions before I move on to members, if that's okay. And I think I'll probably prioritise Councillor Moore after that, because she probably will then Councillor Hadley. I think on actually one of the slides you just showed a really good picture of it. I think it was on the emergency planning page. Is when we're looking at the risk assessments on the heathland and the properties where we've got the fire breaks. So you've got a fire break. Then as it gets to the property, you've got a fence, and then maybe some shrubbery and trees that lead back straight onto those fences. I'm sure Councillor Moore's had the same inquiries as well. A lot of residents are concerned about the process of us managing those sort of areas, particularly off Marshwood Avenue and Pilston on the Heath. Are you able to give us a sort of commentary on how we'd handle that or approach doing that? Because it's a genuine concern for a lot of the residents there, and I'm sure for residents in similar areas in BCP.
Thanks, Chairman. I think it comes down to my point about sort of site by site intervention, really, and where we've got Camford Heath Nature Reserve is a large expanse of heathland, and with a lot of properties around the boundary. So it's about what's proportionate in terms of what we do, but obviously there is an effort to try and minimise extensive areas of sort of tall gorse or extensive sort of heather sort of near to those property boundaries. So I think my answer would be sort of in that realm of kind of individual site assessment and kind of making sure that that's the management and the maintenance of those areas are up to scratch and kind of minimizing the fire risk, really. Obviously we can never predict where the fires will take place and the wind direction and the sort of the issues that then arise from them, but that's I think that's kind of trying to find the proportionate response, I think.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I mean, it may be appropriate for perhaps, especially as ward councillors, perhaps to meet at some of the sites we've got specific concerns with, just to point you through it, because obviously you do a fantastic job, and obviously, with the defensible line to the breaks that are in place and on the Heath, save those households. But anything we can do to work with you folks to improve that would be great. I think possibly the next one is I'm not sure for Stuart, about possibly placing fire boxes at the end of some of these roads, so residents have got an opportunity to perhaps react as quickly as possible to support the service. I was not sure if everyone felt that was appropriate, whether we could investigate that. I think we've looked into some other areas in BCP, but I'm not sure where, so I don't know if there's anything we could incorporate on the Heath.
Yeah, it was something we talked about when we met, Chair, following that incident, and I have looked into this. That there is a slight risk in terms of the risk-benefit analysis of requesting or suggesting that our sort of the public, the members of our community tackle a fire with limited training, limited equipment. In the early stages, that's more than doable for most. However, the siting of these boxes would need to be risk assessed in terms of the any vulnerable members of the community that might be nearby or living in that community close to where these boxes are, and feel that obliged to tackle a fire. In terms of the resources we have available, my personal view would be that we want to get our professional firefighters on scene as quickly as possible. However, we are looking into the national picture around fireboxes, looking at some similar services to us in terms of the rural and urban interface, as we call it, which is the defendable lines and the mitigation we have in place, and looking at those services that have those similar rural interfaces and what they do in terms of the fireboxes. We have a legacy firebox over the other side of Upton Heath that was used to good effect, but that was a number of years ago, and we have had a programme of removing beaters from certain locations and from areas just for that risk. But it is an area that we are continuing to look at and seeing what the national guidance and the national picture is like.
Yeah, I can understand your comments there, because the last thing we want to do is get a resident getting injured from there. Okay, I've got some other questions, but I'll come back. If I go to Councillor Moore, then Councillor Hadley, I've got Councillor Parker, so Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, obviously I live in Camford Heath, and yes, I've also witnessed quite a few fires, and yes, they are very frightening at the time, and they certainly make you appreciate the fire service, and thank you for everything you did last May, because it was amazing. And after the recent fire, the countryside team and the Urban Heath Partnership went into action, and they were pretty impressive too. The social media campaign about the Heathlands is actually excellent. I follow it and share it with my residents, and the residents like it, so please carry that on, please. The education programme is really good. I recently went into a junior school locally, and they knew all about SSSI, and they know all about the problems, and they were telling me, not the other way around. So that clearly works. Can I also say that the canine firewise, I think that's a brilliant idea, and it's a good example of dog walkers working well with the team. I just wish you could get the message out that nesting birds and dogs off leads don't go well together, but I don't want to digress into that one. That one is a tricky one. And I'm also grateful to the litter-free Dorset campaign for targeting supermarkets to stop selling those disposable barbecues. Because just before the last fire, a local supermarket had piles of these barbecues piled up at the entrance. I did ask them nicely if they'd consider moving the display given the fire risk, but I was ignored. But immediately after the fire, they were moved, gone, not a trace. So that was good. But I am concerned that they might well be back again next year on sale. Following the really big fire that they had in Dorset, I think it was the year before last, or 2 years previous, the Dorset Council introduced a PSPO which covers people lighting fires, and it includes barbecues, fireworks, lanterns, campfires, all in various areas across Dorset. So I'm just asking, really, given the recent fires in Camford Heath, we certainly, I think, have the need and the evidence to support a PSPO, and I'm very keen that this council should do everything possible to introduce a PSPO in our area as soon as possible. I think our residents would be supportive, and a PSPO would also protect our frontline staff as well. And I think such a PSPO could also be used to cover a range of damaging activities that occur on our open spaces as well as our heathland, and perhaps that could also be considered. I have actually mentioned this to Martin, if we could have a PSPO in BCP, and he didn't say no. He didn't say yes either, but I believe manpower and inevitably funding has been the problem. So I'm just wondering whether a request for PSPO should be added to the recommendations. But I can come back to that later if you like. But I would like to make a formal proposal for that, but I'll leave it for the minute and keep talking, if that's all right. I've got a few more questions. What are you saying about the fire breaks? Because immediately after a fire, the first thing that residents say is, what are you going to do about the fire breaks? And it would be really useful to have a sort of a definitive, clear answer you could give to people. I know you're saying doing it on a risk by risk, on a case by case basis, and looking at the risk appropriately, but that is the first thing that you get, the very first thing that comes back to you. And there are a lot of houses in Camford Heath which actually back onto Heathland, so it is quite tricky. And they always go back to in Poole, they always used to do it, but BCP don't. Now I know that's not the case, but it is a problem, and it really does, hit you. I expect you've done the same. The very first thing anyone says. But I've also had concerns raised from other residents who don't back onto actual heathland, but onto designated open space, and they have heavy vegetation literally growing against their boundary fences. And in the past, this vegetation hasn't been considered to be a fire risk, but at times of exceptional drought, as we had this summer, residents were concerned because of what happened in London with the instant wildfires. I was told, and I quote, that the council would review policies, and a multi-agency stroke partner workshop will be held this November to look at various scenarios, concerns and the changing climate, help review sites, and if areas of particular concern were identified, then the council would act accordingly. So can I ask, has that review taken place? And if so, what happened as a result? I think those are my questions at the moment.
Thanks,
we go
Councillor.
back to the PSPA?
Yeah, we will do. Yeah, we'll do that towards the end. That's okay. Sorry, Martin, would I come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. I'll try my best. I think I can say I've made some take those in order. So, well, if I go in reverse order, so the vegetation against fire lines, I'm not aware of that workshop, or not quite clear on where that was proposed, but yeah, it's certainly as a that multi-agency response is something that we're as you've heard we're clearly committed to. So maybe I can pick up with you afterwards, Councillor Moore, on kind of the origins of that, and that's not something we've progressed that I'm aware of, unless Paul and Stuart are going to tell me otherwise, but I'm not seeing any great moves there. So we can certainly follow up on that. But I think my broader answer on that is to try and kind of offer some reassurance that that each individual heathland or countryside area and space does have a wealth of knowledge and expertise behind it in terms of our countryside teams who manage those spaces and got lots of experience in trying to mitigate as much as possible the fire risk in particular. And so I know it's an easy thing to say to come back to that work, but that is the basis for all of this, for any proposals or any new policy. So I can come back to you in sort of outside of the meeting if that's okay on that one. In terms of PSPOs, I don't know, Chair, if you'd like me to answer that or not now. I think the short answer is
It'd be nice to have your opinion on that, Martin.
The short answer is yes, we're trying to make it happen. So community services are pushing forward a PSPO that originated out of the beaches, the summer response and sort of the issues on the beachfront through this summer in terms of people camping and having fires on the beach and other associated issues with that. So I'm working closely with them to try and bring in the fire related elements of our heathland management into that same PSPO. There's quite a swift timeline on that through this winter to try and make that happen. So we're trying our best to try and bring the countryside and the sort of the management of that into that same PSPO at the same time. That won't cover the dogs and their related issues as well, and we will definitely save that for another day if that's okay. But as and when we start drafting that up, then obviously that'll come back as a draft for that piece of work as well. And just I'd like to make a point about the barbecues, the national campaign that goes into that. So the disposable barbecues is a real issue and something that Paul and the fire service both been working really, really hard on to try to get that message into the supermarkets and those retailers at all levels that yeah, they cause so many problems for us in terms of wildfires, and they're a real thorn, and we've got a lot of evidence that suggests they are the cause of a lot of the fires. So there's a huge amount of work going into that, and we will continue to press that message that they don't they're not suitable and appropriate for use in the open spaces. Hopefully that answered most of those queries.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. That's one of the questions I was going to ask actually, is about the causes and how much we contribute to that towards disposable barbecues. But obviously, I think you've answered that. You think that's most of them are coming from that aspect.
Yeah, Stuart, I don't know if you want to comment in terms of your knowledge on the detail of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we had we struggled to get beyond the fact that it was human intervention that was a significant factor in the start of that fire, the cause of that fire. The Studland Heath job, we found the remnants of disposable barbecue, cutlery, beer cans at the seat or the head of the fire. So we were confident that was caused. And obviously, historically, a few years ago, the Wareham Forest fire. I was one of the first officers on scene, and we did locate the campfire for that, which was a range of disposable barbecues right next to some gorse. And if you followed the wind direction, you could see the burn pattern straight away, 3 kilometres long. So yeah, we are lobbying whoever will listen to us. We've had a piece on the One Show. We carried out an interview on Camford Heath with the One Show presenters, and we're trying to get a national Fire Chiefs Council behind us in terms of lobbying for the sort of cessation of the sale of these disposable barbecues, because they just create they just destroy habitats, destroy wildlife, and in our rural and urban interface, which were quite unique in terms of our housing, our residential properties next to those rural heathlands, they're incredibly risky, not only to the residents but to my teams, to the firefighters that need to deal with those incidents. We use different tactics at Camford Heath in April that we needed to employ and increase the element of risk to the firefighters to save the properties, and it went well on Camford Heath in terms of that, but that's not always going to be the case. So prevention is far better than a cure.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I think anything we can do to lobby our MPs to get that through, because I think a lot of us in agreement of banning those things. So I think I've got Councillor Hadley and Councillor Parr. That's okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you. It's great to see the partnership working well together, and thank you all for giving up time to come and talk to us. I was surprised on reading the report, though, that the message was, well, we don't need to do anything, and that kind of implies we're perfect. And I don't think we can ever rest on our laurels. So particularly with wildfires increasing and climate change and some of the things, I saw a shocking number of a map showing a shocking number of wildfires across the whole of Europe. And some of them weren't quite as avoiding the human habitation increase in places like that. So it's a real issue. And I too was going to raise the issue about the PSPO. I'd be really keen that it is constrained to fire and doesn't go into lots of other things. This is an area where we don't. There's a thing about controlling all activity, and particularly for kids, they need to get the education. They need to be told to be sensible and safe, but they don't need to be corralled all the time. I think they need a bit of wild space. So, and I was also interested in the arson court drama. It didn't go in the paper as much as you have in the presentation, because I was concerned about it just being 12 to 13-year-olds. You've highlighted that it's younger, but only 4,500 students. I wonder how many of our students that is. And the point I was going to make is kids from all over Poole, all over BCP will probably head to the Heath to get away from adults. And so I wonder whether you spread the net wide enough in terms of those. Well, I'm old enough to remember in the 1976 fire, in the 1976 really hot summer, I was out damping down the fire at Highcliffe because that's where I grew up. So using the beaters with the fire service and supporting the fire service the day after the big fire when those guys were exhausted, but they were still there supervising us. So I do think there is a role for the public in supporting you if that can be done safely. So I think that's really important. The monitoring, I was interested in things like correlation with the weather, school holidays, and again, it sounds like you've got the data. It just wasn't what was shared. We just saw one image, but it'd be really helpful to understand, what proportion of those things we do think are down to barbecues or campfires. But I was also interested because some years ago I stayed in a rural property in southern France, and the owner talked about having to have quite a large pool in his garden because the pompiers, the fire service, demanded that there was adequate water to be able to put out a fire on his property. And so I'm interested in terms of, again, particularly thinking about climate change, thinking about changing weather patterns, whether we've got enough water held in the landscape, and that would be really helpful for flooding as well. And I know we have bogland in the heathland, but do we actually have enough ponds in the right places to be strategic for the fire service to be able to make use of at the right time? And also a habit, I know it's driven by Natural England, to clear all the woodland on the heath. And you talked about woodland being cold spots. I think it's also a refuge for birds and for other things. So, is there something about not being quite so draconian in getting rid of any woodland on the heathland in order to create some cooler areas, some refuge spots for wildlife, and perhaps also help with the fire breaks? So I just make those observations. Thank you.
Councillor Hadley. Dwayne, do you come in there?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, I'd say thank you for a fantastic overview of the work that you've been doing, and of course, the firemen do a very brave and valued job. As Ward Councillor for Kimpton, we have Turberry Common, which is an urban heathland. I'm keen to see this be safeguarded. I'd like to support more education around the prevention of the spread of wildfires at schools. Is there anything more that we can do as ward councillors to help spread awareness? Thank you.
Sorry, Paul, I think you indicated that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back, at the moment we have resources, and our target is 31 schools across the area. We've recently done quite a lot of work on looking forward and what we should be doing in the future, which the partners have fed into, and looking at what resources are possible. And we now, going forward from next April, we've got a target of 61 schools, and that's covering almost every school that's within 1 kilometre of a heathland across the Dorset area and BCP area. So that will be our target. We've got some increased resources to actually to try and deliver that target. There's lots of issues that we come across in getting into schools, and the question about how can you help us, and that's really, if you have any contacts with schools, is to champion that the UHP can come in and offer resources, because we do find it very difficult to get into schools. We partner with the fire service on some of those, and on some we go in ourselves, but there is more resources coming along that have been agreed. But yeah, any support in contacts with schools, pointing them our way, that's appreciated, because the problem is getting into some schools. A lot of schools are very receptive, others, it's difficult. So any support with that will be appreciated. I was just going to make a comment about the annual report or the monitoring. We actually produce annual monitoring reports, and they are available on our website. So that kind of goes into more detail. The visual that we put up for the monitoring was just one tiny element of that, but there is an annual report produced every year, so they are available on our website. So that's my comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Councillor Forrest, happy to come back with you, okay?
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we've got Councillor Lawton, Councillor Brooks.
Just a quick one. Stuart, thank you for coming to the Cenotaph on Sunday. It's nice to meet you. Well done.
You're more than welcome, Councillor. It was so well attended as well.
It was very well attended. I'm digressing slightly, but it was well attended.
If I can use that opportunity just to add into what Paul has just mentioned about the education. We work with the Urban Heath Partnership in terms of getting into schools, and we have a very strong brand to get into schools through various levels and various areas of education. And DW5 managed to get into Q2. We carried out education and intervention, including Urban Heath Partnership discussions with over 1,533 children and young people just in Q2 alone, and that will include education around heathlands, etc. So any further targeted areas such as the Turby Common, I'm looking at some statistics here. We have had a number of incidents in the last 6 months over in the Turby Common and over in Bourne Valley and Sturt Lane. So we monitor all those areas, and I work with the Safer BCP partnership to target deliberate fire setting, arson, deliberate arson sort of events and antisocial behaviour to see where the trends are and where the patterns are, and we feed that back into the Urban Heath Partnership and our arson coordinator through DW Fire. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I mean, education is extremely important. The question I was going to ask, I'm slightly concerned or worried that some of the percentages that you yourselves mentioned earlier on, 80–90% increase in fires in the Heath fires is quite worrying and quite concerning. There's obviously mitigating factors there. Sometimes you mentioned it could be arson. Sometimes it's just accidental. But also I'm concerned, is it a lot of them, are they caused by people being silly with disposable barbecues? Now, somebody mentioned earlier on about lobbying our MPs, and I think Sean has mentioned that as well. I'm happy to do that, but what I would like from yourselves, from somebody, is the incidence of and the growth of these heathland fires and how much of it that you believe is caused by portable barbecues, disposable barbecues. Because if a great percentage of them are caused by disposable barbecues, we should obviously seriously be lobbying government to take some action. I mean, as a Conservative, I'm against banning things, but sometimes some things do need banning. And one day, God forbid, somebody may lose their life through a heathland fire. So we need to take action right away, and we can, as councillors, help you to lobby. I can lobby my own MP. I can lobby the two Bournemouth MPs. We can lobby Robert Sims. We can lobby Michael Tomlinson in Dorset. We can do that, but we need the evidence to be able for them to go to government. So please, if you could do that as an aside and email Sean and myself with it, or the committee, we can then do something about it, or attempt to do something about it.
Thanks, folks. That'd be really useful. Sorry, is that Paul first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was not on the statistics. We haven't got the expertise for the causes. That's for the fire service. But just to make you aware that there's a piece of work going on, and Martin will be aware of this. That Dorset Litter Free Coast and Sea have sent letters to the MPs to try and get a national workshop where this is discussed with the emphasis on trying to get the members of Parliament to push for a ban on disposable barbecues in areas of high risk. So we're not sure at the moment whether where that's to, but Martin will certainly be involved in that if that comes off. Where he's certainly in touch with the counterpart from Dorset who's working on that. So I'm sure we can feed into that as it progresses.
That would be extremely useful, but as I say, we need to differentiate between silliness, which is I think Stuart or somebody mentioned potentially children in school holiday or whatever, but if there's a great part of that is due to disposable barbecues. That is something we can take action on, but I need the stats. We need the stats to lobby our MPs for them to lobby government.
Thanks, Rob. Stuart, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just regarding the stats, it's something I can look into. We have a data collection system that we were able to interrogate to look at the data around the cause of fires. It's incredibly difficult in some incidents because of the destruction caused, and it's so most likely causes what we end up coming up with. But I can look at that and I'll get some figures to you, Chair, and to you, Councillor Lawton, in terms of stats in the DW fire area, and also try and highlight the BCP areas. And in terms of the lobbying, we will support you with those stats and try and drive home the message that that is what is needed. In terms of those causes, I think the patterns have started to increase, and hopefully will settle. And some of the data would suggest that the COVID element of people having staycations and wanting to stay in the UK and ultimately act irresponsibly in our wonderful county. Those are the ones that sort of have led us to look at this rise. And we're hoping to see a fall in that as sort of all the borders have opened up and people are starting to holiday away. But that being said, we do get an influx of tourists to our counties that we could hopefully will engage in nationally with this picture through the NFCC.
Well, any help you can give will be super. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. It's really appreciated. Hedges.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm more familiar with the New Forest, where they undertake controlled burns to actually control the gorse and other growth. That's my first question. Is that something that you see as a mitigation strategy? The second thing is just widening, apart from the commons and the heaths, is the fires that we've seen on the cliff faces, particularly in Bournemouth. We have people, that's the problem, I guess, people who are having their barbecue behind their beach hut, or that they have just disposed of something in a way that rapidly catches fire up the face of cliffs. Over in Highcliffe, we have a very long SSSI. Fortunately, we haven't had fires in that area for a long time. But it seems to me that this is a responsibility of BCP, Seafront team, or whoever, to actually properly maintain the cliff faces so that these incidents are in fact reduced. I don't know what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Thank you. No, sorry. Sorry, Martin. It's on for you.
Sorry, thank you, Joe. Yeah, it buffered for a moment, then I lost the sound. Yeah, so I think there's two issues there. Controlled burns on the size and scale and proximity to housing of the heathlands that we have. I think for the issues that we're talking about tonight about fire defendable lines near the urban fringe, that's not really a sort of a technique. I think the controlled burns are a fantastic habitat restoration kind of function and kind of tool where you got a large expanse of lowland heath with quite sort of low levels of vegetation already, and it just helps to kind of maintain that desired sort of mix of species. So what we're talking about here is usually dense blocks of gorse and other vegetation which is harder to manage, to use in a controlled burn. So yeah, sort of different tool in a different place, I think, on that one. And probably a similar answer on the cliffs in some ways. Actually, we've got a range of techniques in terms of trying to manage the vegetation on the cliffs. It's a very, very tricky place to try and manage the land and the vegetation cover. So as you'll be aware, we've got blocks where we've got goats grazing in there, and they really are the best and most efficient way to manage that vegetation. They will get everywhere on that cliff face where we struggle to get anywhere other than the very top and the very bottom due to the steepness of a lot of those cliffs. But we work closely through Simon and with the Seafront team to try and ensure that we're keeping the sort of the fringe of the bottom of the cliff in relatively low vegetation so that the beach huts aren't at risk. But it does also come down to that kind of that range of presence on the beachfront or from our countryside team on the cliff top in terms of just trying to enforce and educate as well and try and really everything we just heard about disposable barbecue. So I think there's a whole range of mixed messaging or sort of mixed tools there in terms of our maintenance and management of those spaces. But yeah, quite difficult. And if we want to, proactively cut the vegetation ourselves manually, then that's a very expensive contractor operation in terms of you need ropes and harnesses and all the right kit and experience to be able to undertake that. So yeah, a mixture of approaches, I think, is fair to say there.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Councillor Brooks, as well. Okay, I don't think we've got any other speakers, and we've got some endorsements we need to make as a committee, which I'm sure you'll be happy to join me with. I think the first one is endorse the current management approach to wildfires, endorse the current work of the emergency planning team to support and react to the events on the ground, acknowledge the strong partnership working already in place through the Urban Heaths Partnership, Dorset, Wiltshire and Dorset Wiltshire Fire and Rescue Service. So everyone happy to endorse? I don't think Councillor Hadley's out of the room, so I'm not sure we can do that until he returns. Yeah, I think yeah, okay. We can yeah, we can pick that up with him afterwards. But I think I'm happy to move that. Is everyone happy with that? Also, Councillor Raw and I've had some note and email exchanges regarding a recommendation we hope everyone would be able to support. So committee recommends that officers work to introduce a PSPO to cover damaging activities such as the use of disposable barbecues in areas of heathland, woodlands and open spaces. Work should commence as soon as possible with a view of a PSPO being introduced in the new year. Would everyone be happy with that? We can get that emailed out if that helps. Yeah, of course, yeah. Yeah, obviously I've got to obviously vocalise it before we can so we can discuss it. Would anyone want that emailed out? So you can can read it via an email? Yeah, we'll put it in the meeting chat so everyone can see it by Teams.
I just wondered if it was a bit too vague because it's not quite told.
Okay. You want to say something? Yeah. Sorry, Steve.
Also, Mohan, sorry, Mohan's there.
Sorry, Mohan.
Yeah, thank you. If it's not against the direction here, it's only just to check we're not we're doing this thoughtfully, because actually I absolutely applaud the move towards the kind of the a more a stronger enforcement style of this, which I think is what is captured by the proposed amendment. First of all, PSPO, it's almost we're familiar with it because we've done it in other places. So only just a check for me is, are we sure it's PSPO? Are we sure it's not something else which is more appropriate to a heathland or something else? I don't know the answer to that, but let's just jump on PSPO because we happen to have used it elsewhere. Number one. Number two is, strange enough, actually, the comment from Councillor Moore, I do understand we're going to make it tight. Actually, I'd argue the opposite. I'd actually say word this in a way that actually gives it a strong push towards enforcement, but actually let the officers and experts deliberate about what's the best way of doing it. I'm a little bit nervous about the repeated mention of disposable barbecues. I'm not for a minute denying that they have absolutely been the root cause of some of the instances and so on. In a wider debate that wasn't about heath fires, there's a reason why disposable barbecues exist, okay? Because for many people, it's the only way of getting a cheap day out, actually. So let's not corner ourselves with the wording of this motion. I think make it substantial, but actually just give flexibility for what's actually going to be implemented. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, that's a good insight there. So thanks very much for that. Sorry, Steve, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I had similar concerns actually, because a PSPO is a fairly serious thing, I think we need to consider what else might be included and the areas that it may cover. And if we're talking about a PSPO that's within the BCP conurbation, it may be that the PSPO would also be applied to other areas like the parks, the beaches, and things like that, the green spaces generally. And I think, to support PSPO, I think you really need a paper that's specifically written, that's then presented to Cabinet and routed through over the scrutiny in that way. Now, notwithstanding that, I have obviously no objection whatsoever to what's being suggested here, and it's going to help protect the heathlands. But I just think we don't want to jump the gun. If we're going to do it, we've got to do it properly, and we've got to consider everything.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate everyone's input in there. So, perhaps what the outcome of this might be that we set up a task and finish group just specifically for this item to look at it and report back as soon as we can. But let's see. So we've got Kerry that wanted to come in. Sorry, that was on the Kelly. Sorry, Kelly on there.
Hi, I think I can help with this. So a report going to December Cabinet, which looks to support the principles of developing a Public Spaces Protection Order, PSPO, for a number of different behaviours, and that follows the review of the seasonal response activity undertaken and the issues that we've seen in the summer. What we need to be very careful of is not to preempt a decision around a PSPO. There are two very critical elements to the process. One is that we have to see sufficient evidence to show that the conditions in the legislation have been met, and secondly, a public consultation is required. So the recommendation that is going to December Cabinet is to complete the evidential work that's required, and then to look to progress to a public consultation on a wider PSPO to cover off a number of different behaviours. I just thought it would be helpful to clarify that work is already in train.
Okay, thanks. Have you got any particular advice that we can sort of take on board to sort of get our concerns regarding sort of Heathland fires in with that report? Or is that too late for us to include now?
I can tell you that barbecues and open behaviours that we're looking to deal with within the PSPO. But as I said, at the moment, this is about really at a feasibility stage. We need to make sure that we've got the evidence, and I would really, it would be helpful perhaps if members want to provide any information to us. But we've already been working with the fire service in order to map the issues that we've seen, and the evidence really needs to drive this in terms of which geographical areas we map across a PSPO, and that PSPO then has to be consulted on before the council comes to a decision.
Okay, that makes sense. Martin, would you like to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I'm glad you were able to provide that context and detail, and just to sort of highlight, I suppose that recently been given the opportunity to work with Kelly's team in terms of just scoping out and looking at the opportunity to bring in the Heathland areas into this kind of piece of work. So I'm confident we've got the evidence and the sort of the stats and the data behind it and the mapping that we can bring into that, and that's something that I'm looking to work with Kelly's team on as a sort of matter of priority to try and meet that deadline that Kelly referred to. So just wanted to kind of just sort of add that point, really.
Okay, thanks for that, Martin. Sorry, Councillor, did you want to go?
Yeah, I understand. Obviously, you've got to get this right. We're going to do it. The only thing I would say is that it has already been done in Dorset. We have the evidence because we had horrible fires earlier this year, and I've already been assured by Martin that it would help the situation. I think the only thing we need to do is to actually sort out the finer points. I agree with that, but it's already been done in neighbouring Dorset, and if they can do it, so can we.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to reiterate the point as someone in Town Centre Ward where we've got an increasing number of flats and places without outdoor space that to include open spaces in there is a concern unless we're looking at how we can have safe barbecue spaces. It would be great, of course, if we worry about the planet if there are less barbecues per se, but there is something about trying to make sure we've got controlled areas. We've done it for the beaches, we haven't done it for the rest of the conurbation, so perhaps we need to look at that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, sir. Sorry, Mohan.
Just quickly, just following on from Councillor Moore's, if Dorset have done it great, actually, unless I missed it, literally what's been their experience? Has it been a resounding success? Maybe. Is there anything else they do differently? Okay, let's build those lessons in.
That's a good point. Yeah. Stuart, sorry, did you hear that?
Yes, yeah, there are some pockets of PS Dorset County, Wareham Forest, etc. And so far, in my experience and exposure to that, that's a very good experiment and a very good sort of interaction with the teams, and good results in terms of that awareness for visitors to Dorset. And I think if we manage this correctly, it's something we really should have in BCP, just to mitigate and a further mitigation for these events that are so destructive to all.
Thanks, Stuart. And Paul, you were indicating as well. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to say that the PSPOs in Dorset was run as a pilot. It's just on Forestry England managed land at the moment. The indication is that they will consider rolling that out, and partners within the Urban East Partnership are keen to roll it out wider in Dorset. There have been issues in bringing things like this, as there always is. As Stuart said, that the messaging and the that side of it of getting the message out has worked really well. The enforcement of it hasn't worked so well in terms of the resources and of training officers to actually bring in lines. So that's been a bit of an issue. But in terms of the messaging, it's felt to have been a success that it's raising the awareness. Going forward, they have to look at how they train people to take those fines up, because it has to come from the county council, or the council, sorry. So there are issues, but it's a general feeling that it's a positive step.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Okay, have we got any more speakers? Because we probably need to finish off and move on to the next item. Sorry, Dwayne?
Yes, just a very quick one, Chair, if I may. We're maybe being a little bit pernickety, if you like, but we're constantly saying PSPO, but for the benefit of the viewers watching online, what is a PSPO? I know what it is, but the general public might not be fully aware of what it actually means. We're just, we're talking in abbreviations or acronyms, and sometimes it's, it goes over people's heads.
I mean, it's a public spaces protection order. I think Kelly's probably the better person to give all the detail behind that.
Yeah,
it's a good job you're here.
It's a public spaces protection order. We have to be very careful about how we word the order, which will restrict behaviours, and that can then be enforced against. That would mean that we would it's an offence to breach a PSPO, and both ourselves and the police would be able to serve fixed penalty notices in relation to breaches of any public spaces protection order. Essentially, it does what it says on the tin. It is there to protect our public spaces, and as I said earlier, it's really absolutely critical that we've got the evidence and that we are very clear in what the behaviours are that we're looking to restrict, and then how that will be enforced. Hopefully that helps.
Great, thanks, Kelly. As far as I can. Brilliant. Okay, I think we probably need to move on and take a quick comfort break. But just before we do, I think it's important we acknowledge the concerns of the committee regarding reducing the risk around wildfires. So, I mean, I can ask Claire very kindly to put this in the chat before we move on. So what I've got at the moment, to summarise what we've got, is committee supports the work underway to introduce a PSPO to cover damaging activities related to wildfires in areas of heathland, woodlands and open spaces. Was everyone happy? Everyone happy with that? Would you rather I emailed it out as a? Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just worried about the open spaces in terms of that means parks and other areas, and I think possibly, but it does come back to Councillor Barrett's point that to rush into it and to cover all of that just means that anyone going to Sturt Green and some of those places we are looking to extend the length of the grass, so it may be that it's appropriate, but I think we need to look at that slightly carefully. I think it's good if the work is underway, as Kelly's indicated, going to Cabinet in December. The question is, what wording do we need additional to what's already going into a report we haven't seen? So it may be more we support the work and to make sure that heathland fires are included within the remit of the scope of the PSPO.
I think it's a danger trying to get everyone's input. And I value what you're saying because the last thing you want to do is stop someone using a disposable barbecue in an appropriate place. So perhaps we keep that. I know we can debate with the meanings of words all night long because everyone interprets the same statement 100 ways. So what about we just leave it as this committee support the work underway to introduce a PSPO to cover damaging activities related to wildfires in areas of heathland, woodlands and inappropriate open spaces. And then obviously it goes off and then as a committee we can monitor the work from that. Is everyone happy with that? And I'll ask Claire during the comfort break, I'll ask Claire very kindly to put that in the chat so everyone knows exactly what it is. Is that everyone? I don't think we need to vote on that, but I think everyone's in agreement. Yeah. Okay, so we have a quick 5-minute comfort break and then we'll go on to the next item. So thanks everybody. welcome back, everyone. Just to let you know, Councillor Ignor's had to leave because he's not feeling very well. So we'll move on to the next agenda point, which is item number 9, which is the WISE fly tipping enforcement review. Okay, we've got Councillor Dove leading on this item, I believe. And obviously the focus on this is regarding the littering aspect of the report. So Councillor Dove, are you there? Good to see you.
Hi, good evening. I'm sorry about my LED.
Yeah, sorry for being so late. Sorry.
No, I'm really sorry about the LEDs on screen, so I hope it's still okay. If it gives anyone a headache, I can turn my camera off, just please shout. So the report that's come forward to you has been written following the fly tipping and fly posting paper, which originally came to Cabinet in summer 2021. And this spring, we were asked for a continuation of that pilot so we could look at the entire year's data. So that would allow us a full evaluation of the scheme, which could be properly understood. We wanted to introduce potential improvements, especially around education and communication to fly tipping incidents in the first instance. And we felt it was important within that review that we remained open to all enforcement models, which included looking at practices of neighbouring local authorities, which you can see are in the paper. We felt that upon assessment of the other options, that this current model is the one that delivers both on service delivery, but also value for money for our residents. And our assessments showed that all the complaints and reports relating to fly tipping and fly posting that had come into the council were all responded to during this pilot period and at no cost to the taxpayer. So in terms of the communication strategy, we have started a Your Waste, Your Duty campaign. And this report highlights how, where and with whom we've engaged. The campaign promotes the personal responsibility of residents, businesses, and also raises awareness of the consequences of illegal disposal of waste. So other measures of success has considered the number of engagements that we've had and sort of matched them against the low number of complaints that have been reported to us over the past year. So complaints relating to action by the contractor are really minimal. We've had 12 cases that have been escalated to our environmental protection manager for review. One of these complaints was upheld, another was partially upheld, the others were not, and the fines remained in place. And in all of these cases, the conduct and professional standards of the officers have been excellent. The contractor who's awarded this contract will continue to wear uniforms and wear body-worn cameras. It's really important that our professional standards are maintained at all times. The contractor will be required to adhere to BCP Council's Code of Conduct. And body-worn camera footage will be dip sampled or viewed upon a complaint being investigated. Overall, the pilot has been a success, and we've had really positive feedback to reflect on from our waste services and environmental health colleagues, as well as residents and local businesses. But I should mention that councillors too, including the very enthusiastic Councillor Andy Jones, who's found the service has really met the needs of both his residents, but supported him in his role as a councillor. So the report considers the next steps for this pilot, and it outlines the options appraisals that have been completed. The outcome of this is that we are proposing to continue with the contract as it is, but with an external provider for fly tipping, fly posting, but also looking to extend this to include litter enforcement, given the positive outcomes that this pilot has demonstrated. Now, I know that many people will consider littering as low-level, low-harm activities. The cumulative impact on our environment is significant. One crisp packet takes up to 80 years to degrade, and even longer when protected from the elements, such as if they're caught under bushes or hidden in undergrowth. Microplastics are also being excreted into our drains, which can enter our watercourses. We have included more information within the report regarding sort of grading times to give a picture of how damaging it can be. But I would say that it's clear that littering is an activity that we need to be actively discouraging and enforcing against. Now, it would be fair to say that litter is an issue for BCP, and it was noted as one of the main challenges in the review of our summer response programme. It really ruins the enjoyment of residents and visitors who want to come to and visit our towns, beaches and open areas. But furthermore, it costs a considerable amount of time and money to clear and remove. So the fines we've determined would be set at £150, but it would be reduced to £75 if paid within 14 days. I think it's important to ensure that this is not seen as an income generating activity. It's actually quite the opposite. So there is no provision for any returned income to be included within the budget, and any sums returned to us will be solely used to support legal action, such as incidents of non-payments of fines, communications, signage, and other activities related directly to enforcement. The report outlines the intended approach, which will be to tender for a contractor to undertake enforcement across fly tipping, fly posting, and littering. This will expand the scope of this approach and proactively tackle an extended portfolio of environmental crime. To include littering within the scope of the contract will allow for positive and robust enforcement model. And when coupled with strong communication and an engagement strategy, it does provide the opportunity to prevent and deter this behaviour and protect our environment. I think I'm going to pass over to Jess Gibbons, if I may, Chair, just in case there's anything that I may well have missed.
Of course, good to see you, Jess. Sorry it's such a long evening.
No problem. I had a sneaky bit of dinner while you were doing the other item. I don't think you've missed anything, Bobby, but I just wanted to let the committee know how important this work is, sort of working across all of operations and how joined up the teams have been on it, but also just highlighting the timeliness of this. Anything the teams can do to reduce people dropping litter actually helps us be more efficient in terms of our service delivery across an environment, because we do have a lot of staff time and a lot of resource out picking up litter ourselves, as you'll be well aware of. And it's also at a time when as much we can do to discourage businesses from fly tipping, as much as we can do to stop people doing that, as their budgets are tighter and people might be more inclined to think it might be okay to not take things to the dump, not to dispose of things properly, but fly tip. So I just think the timing of this is absolutely critical. I think it's a really good piece of work in terms of the innovation of the team, driving that commercial opportunity, and sort of by that I mean using other expertise, not just our own, and making a real difference to hopefully people's behaviour and therefore what we actually see on our streets, and a real difference to the place of BCP.
Yeah, so thanks both. I think that's, as you just said, I think the report's is really strong, and it also demonstrates some of the good work that's going on. If I just open it up to any committee members who've got any questions. So Councillor Hadley. Okay,
Thank you. Yes, it's interesting that it's highlighted as the most economically best for the council, and we're obviously looking for savings all over the place. And as I read the report, paragraph 28 suggests the external cost would be about £300,000 a year. Paragraph 31 suggests the internal cost would be about £200,000 a year, which would leave you in year one £100,000 to deal with setup and all those sorts of things. So I do query whether continuing on an external basis is necessarily the most economically viable, because I think there's a payback potentially quite easily within a year of doing it internally rather than externally. And going out with this company, they came to us to offer the service. I don't know how many other competitors there are, whether we can actually have a sensible competitive process to go through, or whether it might be Hobson's choice. The other thing that concerns me, and it's interesting that the Dando survey was attached to the report as something for us to look at, because that was quite useful in terms of why, the motivations for why people do fly tip, and some of that is around the cost of legitimate disposal. It's around the availability of access to recycling centres, and we've reduced the hours of our recycling centres. So if you're to just working hours. So if you're not available then you're basically down to the weekend or dumping stuff. And the other thing that and it comes back to the earlier report, as I mentioned, things like the new to you. There's a habit in places like Brighton. They have what they call giving to the street, where you leave stuff outside your house for anyone to come and help themselves to. And similarly in Australia, they actually will bring out the dead day, where anything you don't want goes out on the street, and anyone can help themselves. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of the weekend, the refuse trucks come along to clear up whatever has not been taken. So there are other ways in which you can handle some of this waste in a way that perhaps is more carrots rather than just sticks. And I'm really concerned about people being fined for leaving stuff by the gate for other people to pick up. And I did just actually read that there is suggestion that people will get a warning first. But I wouldn't want to community-spirited ideas of giving away things that you don't want to have another use is something I think we should really be encouraging. And again, the other part, I guess, of people who tend to fly tip maybe is because they haven't got the means to get to the tip because we've removed all our community recycling facilities around the town. So again, I think we could perhaps do more in other ways in order to support or complement this process. And I just worry a little bit that we're jumping to the commercial thing because it's the easiest thing for us to do rather than because it's most economically viable for us.
There was a lot in there, Councillor Hadley. So I don't know who wants to pick that up over Councillor Anderson or Jess. Oh, Jess has got her hands up very eager there. So
I'm just keen this evening. I'll I just answer first, and then I'll bring Kelly Ansell in, actually, who will be able to answer any detail. And Bobby, please, if you want to come in, do, or Mark. Chair, just to refer you to option 2 is the option that report's recommending, which is cost neutral to the council. Refer people to paragraphs 24 to 30 in the report, which really set that out clearly, that there would be 52,000 projected revenue back to the council for our investment in environmental crime. So really to emphasise, this is cost neutral to the council, which is why officers are really strongly recommending this approach. Kelly, did you want to come in on that?
Thanks, Jess. Just to say, and just to be really clear, there is no cost to the council. There would be if we were to provide this in-house. So that's what's quoted as the 200,000 cost. And as Jess has said, this is about being able to undertake this activity, working with a private provider where income would be generated, or revenue would be generated to support our wider work. In terms of competitive process that Councillor Hadley mentioned, we do intend to go out to tender for this. We've done some market testing and that's been very positive. So that is the next step that we need to work through, provided this is approved at Cabinet. And that really gives us the opportunity to test the quality of the partner and their proposals in terms of who we work with. I don't know if David Rickards, who's also on the call, wants to pick up any of the other points that were raised around some of the waste issues.
Thanks, David.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm the Waste Disposal Manager in the Environment team. Councillor Hadley did mention the community recycling centres. A lot of the community recycling centres were removed at the same time as we introduced the recycling bins across Poole and Bournemouth, so there was no need for the glass banks on car parks, etc. But obviously, by giving people recycling bins, they didn't need to use those other facilities. The reduced hours of HWRCs, yes, that was done many years ago, and that was a reduction in cost situation, because it allowed us. We had a lot of staff working 4-day weeks because of the opening hours were so long. And we changed that to 5-day operations for staff, so that we did have to reduce some of the hours. Plus, we did look at the data, and there was a late opening on a Thursday, certainly in Poole there was, but the amount of residents actually using the late opening was absolutely minimal and didn't justify keeping the sites open with all of the costs of keeping the sites running at that time. So we looked at the busiest times of the sites, which are the times we operate the sites now, which is 9 till 5 in the summer and 9 till 4 in the winter, 7 days a week. And of course, we've got 3 sites now that people can utilise as well, whichever's closest to them.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just on the cost, can you confirm? Sorry, I assumed that the £200,000 cost, there would still be the level of fines, which is funding the free service. It's still expensive for potentially for people who are, you know, for our citizens who might be transgressing. But I thought the £200,000 cost would be offset by the income from the fines. Are you saying it's £200,000 plus £300,000 fines?
The cost of providing of pulling together a staff team to that sort of scale would be 200,000. And yes, you're right, there would be income from the fines, but there would also be all of the risk on the council in terms of obtaining that income and in terms of collection, which the proposed option does avoid.
Thanks, Kelly. Councillor Anderson, I think you wanted to come in. It's okay.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just going to make the point that, as Dave's already made, about the removal of the local recycling centres, we still have free collection from, sorry, not free delivery to the household waste recycling centres. We don't charge you for anything. There are a few items that we do charge, which are basically soil, hardcore and rubble, asbestos, and plasterboard and tyres, and gas cylinders. and gas cylinders mainly because we can't deal with them ourselves. We have to dispose of them elsewhere. So we most of the stuff, if you can get it to the household waste recycling centre, it doesn't cost you anything to dispose of it. And the other item I just wanted to give a quick plug for was our tip app, which is our Tip Trip app, which has all the information about the various tips on it, which is your closest tip, when they're open, and what the queues are like. So I would strongly advise everyone to download the BCP Tip Check app onto their phone, and it's for the people I've talked to, they find it very useful.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, and also, talk about fly tipping. Obviously, some removal of large items of, the tips are obviously more difficult for some people, but there's no excuse for fly tipping, for anybody. I did have a Forester hand go up, so I'm not too sure who indicated first. So I did get eye contact with Councillor Brooke from Broadstone first, so I think we'll go Councillor Brooke.
Fine, thank you, Chair. Just 2 points, possibly questions. On page 64, you've got a pilot data table A fly tipping. Just interested there to see that while there were over 2,000 investigations into fly tipping, there were only 365 FPNs issued, which is a mere 16%, which doesn't seem to me to be a particularly strong return on the investigations that have been taking place, especially when only 2/3 of those actually paid up. And then you've got all the trouble and cost involved in terms of going to court with the others, assuming that they go to court. The income is welcome from that, but it doesn't seem to me to be overly cost effective. And then on page 59, I think it was paragraph 58, which deals with litter picking, and I welcome very much some work there going into litter picking and trying to get it done, because comparing the centre of Poole, I'm afraid, with the centre of Oxford, where I was the other day, there was absolutely no comparison. There was not a spot of litter in Oxford, and that was because they had fleets of men going around picking up the litter as they went along, and bags and everything else. So it was being done there, and it looked spotless compared with, I'm afraid, Poole and Bournemouth. I can't talk about Christchurch because I haven't been to the centre of Christchurch recently. What worries me is the fact that when this was brought up in the past, there was a real issue around Reaper and the use of cameras and tracking and tracing, because if you are going to find someone or give someone FPN, you actually had to prove that they had dropped the litter and deliberately walked away from it. And the only way you could do that was by using a camera the whole time. And then you get into the issues of following and stalking. And yet we've got here, it is deemed that the required work will not require authorization under Reaper. So who has deemed that we do not require Reaper? And could you explain, please, why we don't need Reaper when cameras are perhaps the only way that you can prove? And if you can't prove it, you can't issue an FPN, and you're not going to raise any money. And therefore, it's going to be a cost pressure rather than a cost neutral situation.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Brett. There's some interesting questions. I've got Matthew here that wanted to come in. So hello, Matthew.
Hi, good evening all. Thanks. Just to pick up on the first point of the question from the councillor, it was regarding the levels of fines served compared to the investigations. Obviously, the evidence threshold is very high for these criminal actions, and therefore, where the evidence has met that threshold, the fines will be served. Many unfortunate incidents, they will not find any evidence. They'll try and interview witnesses if they're willing to come forward. They'll carry out doorstep pace interviews of those accused of doing the tipping, and that's the level that they've achieved in terms of investigations to fines. Some of the items on the floor would have been removed by the time they get there as well. There's a very small delay in most cases, but often others, good citizens, good-natured citizens have come out and cleared that. So that's part of the reason for the discrepancy, if you like, between the number of investigations and number of fines. Equally, there's been cases where what we call side waste, which we're really looking to tackle through this option, where 1 or 2 bags have been left by the side of the bin. And certainly through the course of the pilot, we've made a conscious effort not to just fine first off for that, which is where we've learned through the course of the pilot. In terms of the Ripper investigation, I will pass to my head of service, Peter Aiken, in a second, but I just wanted to comment on the ways of working that you mentioned in terms of following. We're certainly going to put forward very strong terms and conditions and a service specification through the tender and the contract, so that the code of conduct that's actually been recently amended by DEFRA is followed by the contractor. Obviously, people may try to walk away, that's fine. What they will be advised of is that it's a further offence if they've been witnessed dropping that litter, at which point the body cam will start. It will not start prior to that. It will start at when the officer who have delegated powers has seen that offence take place, at which point the camera will start and film the engagement. I hope that answers some of your concerns, but there might be specific points that Peter may want to raise. Thanks.
Thanks for that. So, Peter, do you want to come in at all?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a point about the Ripper. Hi, thank you. Just a point about the Ripper. This is not covert targeted surveillance, which is what Ripper is about. So the legal advice that we've previously had is that because the enforcement officers are fully visible in uniform and they're not covertly targeting anyone, therefore there's no requirement for Ripper authorization. So I hope that clarifies that point.
Yeah, that is interesting. Thanks, Councillor Brick. Do you want to come back?
I can't really come back on that last point at all. If those are the legal definitions, then there's not much I can do. And first point as well is difficult to come back on because I appreciate all the reasons why it may be that you do not take it, the charging or FBN further. So, it's really an interesting situation. And I just wonder, while we really do need to look at those examples where these sort of things are in operation and are proving to be really successful, as to see exactly how they are being worked and perhaps work alongside them, because if we get it wrong, then we get it wrong, and it'll have a really big impact on our budgets.
Councillor Brooks, how do you think? Oh, sorry. Do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for deferring. I'll be brief. It seems to me that littering around our town centres seems to be confined to certain areas. In other words, it's repeat, 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 and then it actually is like, well, it's okay, I can throw this and it won't matter. I do hope in this process, without saying that it's actually pursuing certain individuals or individuals who may be susceptible to throw litter, that in fact the target areas will actually be really focused on, so that those areas can be closed down, because it seems to me it's those particular areas which are going to have the most littering problem, and therefore rather than just a random sort of tour of areas, one should actually be looking quite closely where it's actually a real problem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Councillor, well, I don't know who to go to next. Councillor Rigby, go to you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think a few of the points I was going to bring up have been covered actually, but there was one question that I've got just focused about, I guess, what litter is and what constitutes litter. when we're looking at issuing these fines. And I've got, obviously, we've got the list which was given here and the various things which people can drop and stuff like that. I'm sure that the officers could have an absolute field day on the beaches in the middle of summer without any issues, you know. But something that's not mentioned here, and I think is important that we should be looking at tackling as well as dog fouling. And would that be classed as litter? Because that's a massive problem in a lot of areas all over BCP. So would that be something which should be included?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not too sure. Can I, Jess, you pick on at all?
I'm going to pick on one of my able colleagues, whether Matt or Kelly or Peter would be able to come in.
Excuse my expression of picking it up as well.
I missed that, Chair. Who would be best placed?
Can I take
Go,
that, please?
Peter.
Thanks,
please.
Peter.
Okay, thanks. Chairman, it's not littering. No, dog fouling is different to littering. It does require, as was being talked about earlier, a PSPO to be in place. And there isn't one at the moment. We're hopeful that one will be developed over time. As Kelly mentioned, there were some being developed, and we're hoping that that will be the case with this, but they are very, very time consuming to develop. We could, it's not included in the report at the moment, it can be brought in as soon as we've got a PSPO in place. Other measures to deal with dog fouling involve very difficult forms of legislation around antisocial behaviour, and that requires us to witness it on a number of occasions, so not just on the one occasion. We have done that where we've had people that regularly do that, so we are able to tackle them, but for the one-offs, as with littering, it requires a PSPO to be in place.
Actually, that's really informed.
Okay.
I wouldn't say happy, but you know, got an answer.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's just on that. If I mean the problem really is people who put it in a plastic bag and then adorn a tree or leave it on the path, and it's then a plastic bag full of dog crap. Is that not a litter?
There's a grey area for you.
Yeah. Hi, Chair. I can come back if you wish.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's within a plastic bag, absolutely, we would deal with that under littering. If it's dog fouling that's mess, if it's a mess that's left on the floor without any bagging up or anything like that, I'd support what Pete's just said. So I hope that clarifies. If it's if they witnessed leaving a bag or something, then that will be classed as littering. Yeah.
Right, thanks, Chair. Well, as you know, I've organised community litter picks for years, and although joining these picks is actually now becoming really much more popular, there are still members of the public who think I shouldn't be doing it because it's the council's job. And following on from what my colleague was saying about the RIPA legislation, we did try enforcement with fines for littering previously in Poole, but it didn't work out, partly because of the RIPA and partly because residents were actually really very much against enforcement as well. Having said that, that was then. Perhaps people might be more receptive now. And I think on the beaches, I think people would welcome enforcement there because it is such a huge problem. And the other area, which I think cost the council quite a lot of money to clean up, and is absolutely horrible, are the roadside verges. Obviously, people throw out all their rubbish through the car windows, all their Mackie D stuff, and all the rest of it goes straight out. But I don't know whether or not that would be covered because you need to do registration of cars and all that sort of thing, and I don't know. That's my question, whether or not that can be included or is included, or what the situation is.
We've got Matthew who wants to answer that. Thanks, Matthew. Come in again.
No problem at all, Chair. Thank you. Littering from vehicles comes under different regulations. It was considered early on in this project, but the evidence base we have at the moment is for the general littering, as everyone knows it, which is people walking down the street, you know, dropping whatever they're eating or that sort of thing. So it's something, again, that we can look to as the contract moves through. Enforcement is very difficult of it. You've got to see it. And that's probably where the RIPA came in previously, because you'd have to sit at traffic lights and watch and almost be covert about it. So it does raise a huge amount of questions, and obviously the evidence base we have currently is that we need to tackle this large issue, which is rightly so got the attention of everyone regarding the seafront, but actually many other places across BCP has a serious problem with littering, and I'm really grateful to all those participants of your litter picks. So as part of our comms campaign, we'll certainly be pushing for more people to volunteer for that as well. So thank you.
Can we come back, Councillor Moore, at all?
Yeah, another question. I was just thinking that the other thing that always gets me is when people sit in their cars in car parks and empty out the entire contents of the car and then drive off. So presumably you could be covered, by what they could actually work in car parks and this sort of thing, because it happens all the time.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I've got you. I think it's more of a statement, isn't it? But is it possible? Matthew, is that possible?
As far as I'm concerned, yes. I'll have to check the specifics around the regulations, whether it's dumped out the vehicle in transit or that sort of thing. But they will certainly cover car parks. It's any public spaces that this will cover. Private land is where it changes. So
it's important that when we're talking about perception, because a lot of people, like a bit of a council bash, don't they, and stuff like that. But it's not the council, or not. It's not the organisation dropping litter, isn't it? It's individuals that need to take responsibility and do it. And I don't think we talk as much as we should do about individual responsibility. Just take your rubbish home with you, put it in a bin. It's not it's not difficult. Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a few questions. I've got a lot of questions, but I'm not going to. I'll keep them down through fear of being chastised by the chair. Just to start with, just generally, it's clear that the officers have made their mind up which way they want to go on this, because I did find that the report wasn't that objective in terms of what the other options might be, particularly in-house. Like Councillor Hadley, I had some issues about the possible advantages of retaining an in-house service. Whilst I accept the argument about it's cost neutral and all the rest of it, but these things are never actually cost neutral. They end up costing the management and all the rest of it, albeit I know the report says that some of the money goes towards that. But specific question, on page 65, I think it is, on there's a table, and it's about the inspections for businesses, table B, businesses, duty of care. And it says that there are 578 inspections, of which 384 issued fixed penalty notices. Now that's actually 66% of those that were inspected actually were issued with a fixed penalty notice. And then of those, 260 of those were not paid. So 67% of them weren't actually paid. Now to me that means something's not right here. Now, I'm assuming that these inspections relate to waste transfer notices and not being available. Now, I believe there's a presumption that just because somebody doesn't have a waste transfer notice, that results in fly tipping. It may do, but it also may not. The offence is actually not being able to prove that you have transferred your commercial waste in the appropriate way. So one is, it appears as if the service is not working, or that businesses are just not generally aware of the legislation. And I wouldn't be surprised, because I think it's the first time in probably 20 or 30 years or something that this legislation has been checked, when this trial was introduced. But I guess the key question on this is, what is the criteria for the businesses that are actually visited? And what percentage does that represent of the total number of businesses across the conurbation? A small percentage, I would suggest. But of that small percentage, most of them are not actually meeting the requirement. So I think it needs something far more, much more attention on that particular area. The second question I've got relates to children, and insofar as how do the fines or the ability to fine children for dropping litter? I suspect you can't. That would be my guess, but I'd like some clarification on that, because a huge amount of litter is dropped around schools and around parades of shops where kiddies visit after school. And And that's one. And just another last question, and this is on the use of cameras. Now, the report says that the body cameras were worn during engagement with alleged offenders. In other words, there is some evidence that somebody has committed an offence before the camera is actually used. In practice, when officers are going into the businesses, I believe that the cameras are used initially on the initial contact, in which case it does provoke a certain a degree of hostility from the business owners and shopkeepers. Because somebody walks into your shop and says, "I'm recording you, mate." I know it's not quite like that, but it's not, particularly if they don't understand or have knowledge of the legislation in advance. That them being given a fixed penalty notice very often causes a lot of friction. I'm sure Matthew can tell us a bit more about that one. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Barr. It's quite a lot there, though. So thanks for your questions. So Matthew, pick that up. Hopefully.
Thank you, Chair. I did make if I missed anything off it. So in terms of the payment rates for the duty of care inspections, it's the high percentage that are paid. So it's 260 paid out of those 348. What did surprise me through this pilot is how many of those 578 business inspections led to a fixed penalty notice. I'd suggest that kind of supports the reason for introducing this pilot in the first place, because we have tried for years and years to engage many business owners just through engagement purely. There wasn't any enforcement or consequence, if you like, after that for those that didn't meet their duties. I can assure Councillor Bartlett and others that everyone I've reviewed has a complaint, and some of those have been business inspections. The conduct of the officer has been extremely professional, and what I'd expect. You're correct that during an engagement for a business inspection, it's very different to having witnessed an offence and therefore turn the camera on to obviously capture any evidence and to protect the so-called offender as well as the officer. But during a business inspection, absolutely, it's turned on at the start. They are given the opportunity as a business to present the evidence that they have met their duty of care. And I think we do need to do a lot more comms for businesses, especially. We have worked with economic development on this, to make them aware that this should be seen actually as important as paying your bills to keep your business going. And I think that's what sort of drove this pilot and the reason for this pilot in the first place, to cover the business duty of care, because as you say, that's a huge proportion out of those business inspections that actually fines have been served, and 67% of those have been paid. So I hope that answers the duty of care. Regarding the children, absolutely. I mean, we will not be seeking to serve any FPNs for under 18s. What we hope through our comms messaging is that we target the parents or carers of children, and education can start in the home about littering. We will look at any options we can to go into schools and teach about waste management and littering and that sort of thing. But we would seek to engage the same with anyone with any obvious vulnerabilities that might be littering as well, or committing an offence. We would seek to engage, but certainly we wouldn't look at enforcement for those that have a justifiable reason as to why they didn't know that dropping something or fly tipping was an offence. I think that was it, but apologies if not. Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, Councillor Bartlett.
No, that's great. Just one last. Yeah, I got the numbers the wrong way round on the fines. I accept that. Sorry about that. But I did want to know how many prosecutions there have been for not providing waste transfer notices, given the large numbers of people that were doing it.
Yeah, the prosecution process is significantly time consuming. So we've got 2 on the go at the moment. One of those, it's been so long to get to court that they've actually paid before we need to go to court. So it was a good decision to accept that payment. In terms of moving forward, we would hope that our own legal department would cover any prosecutions that are needed. We really will focus our efforts on those that are consistently not complying with what we're asking, or consistently fly tipping, and for those where the offences are most serious. But we hope with this option as well, we will have scope that if our legal resources, which are obviously not limitless, as indeed the court time isn't limitless, that we will see some more prosecutions coming out of those that haven't paid their fine, and that will include business duty of care. But there's an element of prioritisation of the most significant fly tips, if they have been fined and not paid, or if they've come straight to us, or they're repeat offenders. That's really where we're prioritising at the moment.
Thanks, Matthew. I think we've got Councillor Brooks, Councillor Coote and Councillor Brick. And we'll go to, I think, any other speakers. So.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Very brief point on dog waste. It seems to me there is a problem in that a number of waste bins for dog waste have been removed, and they're on typical routes where you can clearly see that the number of people taking their dogs for a walk, they are then resorting to fly tipping. I think we ought to review also where bins are, known routes for where walkers go, so we can actually stop it actually happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Q.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether I should declare an interest, as I'm a waste carriage licence holder, but just getting back to my colleague over there, all businesses that are carrying waste and to take to commercial tips are all registered. So we are licensed and we're registered. All the fly tippers are obviously people that don't have a license to go to a commercial tip, because as soon as you turn up at a commercial tip, if you haven't got the license, they will refuse you to enter and use their premises. So I just thought I'll make that clear.
Thank you. That's great.
Fine, thank you, Chair. Just a sort of an afterthought, really. Clearly, the beaches and town centres are going to be, I'll put it in this way, easy pickings. But there are district centres and shop parades where perhaps some of the takeaway businesses and the bars don't do anything with regard to their packaging. And I can give an example of one in Broadstone where my litter picks frequently pick up empty glasses that the customers have just left lying around in the raised beds or around the businesses, not bothered to pick them up. Now, I'm just simply asking, how are you going to allocate time to the district centres and the small shop areas, small parades, relative to those big areas where you are obviously going to have the greatest effect? Because clearly something does need to be done in those small centres as well as on the beaches and in the town centres.
Yeah, sorry, just jumping that. I mean, that's a really interesting point, that, because it's clear in local areas you can identify which where the litter's coming from, what business, and what responsibility is that business got to do that. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how we manage that. I mean, I know Dole's occasionally would do litter picks, and some of them patch, don't they? They do. But sometimes it's obvious what businesses do. They lock the doors and walk away, and they could have like a whole pathway in front of their business just strewn with litter that's come directly from themselves. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. So there are some new rules regarding new takeaway businesses, just to make the committee aware. They can be dealt with at an early planning stage and put conditions on, such as additional bins to discourage littering of their food packaging. Obviously, that's only recent. So in terms of how we're spread the patrol areas, that's key. I'm very clear that we're not just going to stay in one or two places, because I see the problem being a Bournemouth resident all over the place every time I visit. And I'm very clear that we're going to have a plan very early on with the successful provider on how they cover the whole area of BCP, particularly where we know that there's parades of shops that's going to encourage more littering, and as well as the town centres and the beachfront. We're looking at a team, which is covered in the report, of at least 4 officers on the ground and 1 team leader who will also be on the ground at various points. So that's quite a significant amount of resource, appreciating that at certain times there will be peaks in priority areas, and a lot of the offenders sadly will be visitors to the area. So that's something we need to build into the plan, and I'll be building into the tender and the service specification.
Okay, so Councillor Hadley, then we'll finish off there, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. Two very quick ones, actually. One was followed by Councillor Brooke around the businesses, and I just wondered, prosecutions is one thing, but actually, have we seen a reduction over the course of the year? Have we seen a significant reduction in businesses from the education programme? Is that working? Was one thing, and then the other thing that was just sparked by your response just then was a real problem we had in Poole Town Centre following one of the festivals on beta. So around events and how that has a knock-on effect beyond the event premises, which the event people are not responsible for, surprisingly, but creates a lot of littering. And in the case of Poole, which one it was now, it might have been the Thai Festival, but I might be wrong. That created a big problem for our teams. Thank you.
You okay picking that up, Matt?
I am indeed, yep. Last time you hear from me by the sounds of it. So in terms of the events, absolutely, we get an events schedule through as part of my team anyway, so we'll be able to task the successful contractor through to that. I failed to answer a question earlier. It's just reminded me there are 6 or 7 national companies that offer this, so we believe it will be a competitive process through the tender. So just wanted to pick that up there as well. Forgive me, the first point has completely escaped me.
It was whether over the course of the year that we've been piloting this, whether there's a trend of reduction, particularly among the businesses, learning that they are going to be fined and therefore acting more responsibly.
So in the review in May, we tasked our waste compliance officers to work closely with WISE as part of the pilot, and we've seen some real good work there and an improvement in the working relationship. And we have seen quite significant improvements in areas of particularly Bournemouth Town Centre, which was demanding a lot of our environmental officers' time. In terms of the data we've got, we started from a very difficult position a year ago, so we kind of set our our baseline now through this pilot. And what I expect to see, if this pilot is successful, which I fully expect it to be, and we'll manage it closely to ensure that, is a significant improvement over the next 12 to 18 months in business compliant fly tipping and littering offences.
Thanks, Matthew. Thank you, Councillor. Right, okay, I think we'll just conclude that agenda item. That's okay, everybody. We've asked to recommend it for the recommendations. Is everyone happy for me to read them out, or is everyone happy to accept them as they are? Yes, cabinet recommendations. Yeah. Is everyone happy with that? I'm happy to read out. Is everyone okay? Okay, it's no different. Okay, let's read them. Okay, so we'll move on to the last point, which is the work plan.
So I'd like to explain on the last point.
Okay. Extension, is it? Yeah, I think we better take a vote for that then. So it's recommendations. Yeah, so everyone accepts them. You can raise the hands if you accept. Any against? No abstentions? I'll pronounce it. Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Yes, regarding the work plan, it is as it is in the papers. We've just noted, obviously, on the cabinet forward plan, there's a future places item for December. So February, that's been changed for February. So obviously, depending on the nature of how much is in there, we may have to put in a special meeting for that. So obviously, I will send out an email to confirm, when that's likely to be, and just check everyone's availability for that. We also got some potential space for an agenda item for the March meeting. So if anyone wants anything specifically looked at, obviously, let me know, or fill out a scrutiny request form. Sorry, Councillor Bartlett.
Right, yeah, after you finish, I just wanted to indicate that I want to speak.
Okay, no problem. Okay. And just to give you a quick update on the tree, the working group regarding the tree strategy, it hasn't had a chance to meet yet. I know everyone's been trying to get diary dates, so I'll chase that up with the officers and the committee members, and hopefully get something in the diary this side of Christmas, because it's important we follow that one up. Sorry, Councillor Bartlett. Sorry, again, Councillor Brooke, Councillor Moore, you want to? I just imagine.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got two items I'd like to suggest for at some stage to be discussed, please. One is the development at Templeman House in Redhill and Northbourne Ward, where a contract to build a block of flats, the contractor has gone into liquidation and the building has only just started. This has a knock-on effect in terms of the plan, you know, the availability of the building, in terms of the cost or potential additional cost. But the biggest question is about the procurement process and the due diligence that was undergone for a contractor that was clearly on the edge of bankruptcy and then went bankrupt. And I think there are a number of fairly significant questions that need to be explored about the impact of that company going into liquidation and those issues that I've mentioned. I think that needs to be explored. The second issue is about the decision to remove the Winter Gardens programme from the capital programme. There are significant implications to that, not least are the potential for future BDC developments. Any profits may be attributable to losses made on other programmes within the BDC contracts. So I think there are some very significant issues arising from that decision, and I think it's that those issues need to be explored and understood by this committee. The third point I want to make is about the work programme itself. If you look at the Cabinet Forward Plan between now and March, at our next meeting, there are a huge number of very, very significant issues coming up. And you've mentioned one of them, and that's the 5 programmes coming forward from Forward Places, which we will not have an opportunity to scrutinise because the Cabinet meeting is before our next scheduled meeting. Okay, well, there are a number of other significant issues in the Cabinet Forward Plan, which I suggest also need to be scrutinised. And it's very difficult to pick one out of the Cabinet Forward Plan that doesn't need to be scrutinised because they are all significant. So I think we probably need to schedule a place overview and scrutiny meeting prior to each of the Cabinet meetings that are coming up. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that. Also, you've put in some very detailed comments there. It'd be difficult for me to sort of go into detail on that. But, you know, as I said, regarding the future places item that's coming up to Cabinet, we will set up a special meeting to, you know, to deal with that. Whereas the other items, if you can the complete scrutiny request form, send it to myself. Obviously, by all means, copy all the committee members in, and we'll go from there, and we'll see what we can do.
Chair,
there's a lot of things going on. Yeah, we do what we can.
Could I just come back on you that then? I mean, it's really about the principle of what we can scrutinise and when, rather than be specific. You know, I'm not going to be going to filling in a request for a scrutiny form for all of these items that are coming up on Cabinet. You know, they're self-evident, and it's about the principle of exposing those papers going to Cabinet to overview and scrutiny. At the moment, there's no opportunity for doing it, and I believe that we need to improve the ability of Council to scrutinise these very important papers.
Okay, yeah, but I think, yeah, obviously, accepted, noted your comments, and also, but I'll look if you can follow the process, we go on scrutiny, and we go from there. Obviously, you've got limited time frame what we can cover, and also with some of those papers there may be agreement that we can find actually with the Cabinet. I think that the danger is that we go through every single paper, every single point, and actually we just dilute the work that we're doing. So I understand what you're saying, but if you can obviously throughout the process, and we go from there. Has anyone got any comments before we?
Thank you, Chair. I would agree entirely with Councillor Bartlett in terms of the need for additional meetings. He's picked out the future work schedule for Cabinet, and place features very, very highly in that. But also, something else does need scrutinising. Originally, the local plan working group was an arm of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. And therefore, when reports went to Overview and Scrutiny Board, there was scrutiny taking place of the information that came out of the working group. There has been a change such that that group no longer exists as a working party to look at the plan. It is now an advisory group and an arm of Cabinet. We meet for the first time after over a year next month on December the 13th, and the work that's done there I will have to present as chairman of that group to the local plan board on the 16th, 3 days later. That board consists of primarily of portfolio holders. So consequently, there is going to be absolutely no scrutiny of the local plan at any stage in its progress from now until whenever it actually comes before the public, unless this particular committee looks at it. And consequently, we're going to need additional meetings to enable that.
Obviously, the scrutiny aspect obviously still picked up by Cabinet and full council, won't it?
If it's picked up, but no, if it's picked up by Cabinet, Cabinet don't scrutinise. That's not their role. They're the decision makers. They respond to the scrutiny that's been carried out beforehand.
Yeah, we need a date for it, don't we? Yeah, like I said, we're saying council, but if you can leave that with us, we'll put a date in for that. You know, even if we need to put a date in, we'll have to sort that. So thanks.
Over a period of time, it'll need to be more than just one, because it's going to be ongoing. It's only our first meeting on the 13th and 16th. It's going to be ongoing until the plan goes into its
yeah, I accept that. Yeah, okay.
Inspection stage at the earliest towards the end of 2023.
Okay, we'll make sure that's put into the plan. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we confirm. Thanks, Councillor, for raising that. That's important. So thank you for that. Sorry, I'm not sure who was next. Was it Councillor Ruby? Oh, Hadley. Sorry, Chris. I'll come back to you. They're also doing something. Are we? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Well, certainly, one part for me is it is chaotic to keep having extra meetings when actually, if we had a meeting for every cabinet, because there's the PSPO we've just found out about is obviously under its consideration for December. There's the climate change progress report which is coming up, and we really should be looking at these things in some detail. They're really important topics. The other thing I just wanted to tag really on to what Steve was saying about Templeton House. There's a long-running saga about Sturt Court and the cladding on Sturt Court, which has been redone. It's on its third iteration, and that's in danger of all coming off the wall because they haven't managed to do half thing, and the cladding cladding fabricator has gone into administration. So I think there's probably a wider issue about how we're letting contracts, how we're controlling them, and keeping control of them when things go wrong, rather than just maybe the one premises. I appreciate Timberland's a good example, but Project Admiral is also similarly beset, I think, by issues which are perhaps in a slightly different basis, but we need to look at this. Thank you.
I mean, Councillor Hadley, so the points both you raised are very important. So could you remind, obviously, fill in the format, or even if it's just an email, if you can send it to myself and Claire, copy the rest of the committee, and where I think those sort of things we need to be looking at, and we'll get something sorted for that. So thanks for that. Okay, I think that probably concludes the meeting. So if anyone else has anything, Councillor Rigby, sorry, I'll keep this. Sorry. I thought you said you were talking about yourself. I'm sorry.
I will be very brief, but and I'm not a member of this committee. I'm only subbing, so it's not my place to tell everybody here what work they shouldn't be doing. But when I looked at the next meeting date for the 1st of March, I just felt that there was far too long a gap, and obviously the colleagues here have spoken about that. But I do think that this committee should sort of pick up cabinet forward plan and work accordingly to that. But this is such a nice committee, Chair. You really can't have great gaps like that until March. We need more regular meetings because it's interesting. Yes, and if you wanted an extra member, you see, I would quite happily to volunteer, but you know, I know needs must.
It's all right, don't worry. I was only going to agree with Council about that actually at the start, but with what everyone else has said, I'm inclined to agree fully. Like, we do need more meetings, and Chair, like you said, Council picks up some of these scrutiny functions, and I can't do it. I can't go every 6 weeks and sit in a 10-hour council meeting that we have to adjourn because it's picking up the functions of what we should be doing in scrutiny. If there's a way that we can, in this meeting now, make a recommendation of some description that we should be picking up and shadowing Cabinet, why not? They meet on a regular basis, the same as we did with the ONS thing. Then is that something we can do now? Make that recommendation as part of our work plan.
I think we've got to be aware of something.
Do you want to do your microphone, Chair?
Yeah, thanks, Al. As we said, if you've got a seconder, of course, we can take a vote on that. I think, as we said, when we were looking at the scrutiny process, there was a danger before that we were looking at everything, as that means it's diluted. So, and obviously, there is different opinions on that, as you know, as we see it in our meetings, and that's also you've got to consider officer time as well. But obviously, if you've got your recommendation, you've got your seconder, I can ask Claire to summarise that. So I think you'll just say, can you just summarise what you said?
I'd be really happy with that as a recommendation. Yeah, I think that gives us a good spaced out series of meetings which we can put in quite easily.
Happy second, thank you.
Chairman, if you don't object to me interjecting, clearly that is a council decision that the overview and scrutiny committees will meet 5 times a year. That was a decision of council that went through the Constitutional Review Working Group, Audit and Governance, and then approved ultimately by council. So you haven't got the remit to change your schedule. I think that would need to be through. I think you can set specials. I think you can set specials, but I don't think you can pass a resolution that we schedule more meetings as a matter of course. I think that needs to be a council meeting, but I think the special meetings is another issue.
Sorry, just to clarify, was that the intention that it was a recommendation to council? And I also just wanted to clarify the time frame in revisiting that as a recommendation to council, given when the decision was initially taken. Sorry.
Every time I make a recommendation, it seems to get more complicated. I've got a habit of it, haven't I? I'm just gonna. If that has to go, if that's the case and it has to go to council to be done, then I guess that's what has to be done. I mean, all right, it's not going to make a huge difference to the amount of meetings we get in now. Maybe we'll get in another couple, but at least we're seeing a pattern which is developing, and this is going to be something that will be put in the constitution, which can follow through for future councils, administrations, perhaps whatever in the future after we are past May. So yeah, I think if the recommendation is for us or yourself, Chair, to take it to council.
Chairman, again, just if I can perhaps give some advice. Clearly, it is the Constitutional Review Working Group that all changes to the Constitution go through. That's the practice we've had. So I think as a committee, I do appreciate your next meeting, I think scheduled for March. I think it would be appropriate. You can set special meetings through, which as chair, you can agree to set special meetings. But I think the recommendation would be that you request the Constitutional Review Working Group to reconsider the scheduling of the Place Committee, because that's what you're doing here, and to what you're saying is to align those to the Cabinet meetings. And then that would ultimately go through the normal process for approval.
And yeah, I'm happy for that to be the recommendation. If we just pretend that I said what Richard said, then.
Yeah, sorry. So can we just insert the word special and have special meetings? The issue is I've just noticed the transport strategy is also due to come. Was supposed to come in November, is delayed. There are so many things that are hitting us. It is frankly ludicrous to not meet and look at and be able to scrutinise these things. And as I said, it makes the council meetings way too long, and because we don't speak.
I think we've got the remit to do special meetings. You've got to follow the constitution, as Richard has said, but we can schedule in, and that's what Sean is planning to do.
Can I go?
I've no idea.
Can I go? I think we need to be clear the purpose of this place overview and scrutiny. Exactly what is its parameters? Andy talks about transportation.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering to what extent are we within the right arena for scrutinising the things that are being mentioned. I clearly agree with Mike here about planning. You know, that is place all over, isn't it? And I agree entirely. It needs a better form for scrutiny rather than being advisory. But I think in terms of the definition of what is covered by place, we need to be quite clear. Thank you.
Just to confirm, all transport issues are included within the remit of place.
And it's on forward plan already.
Yeah, thanks. As I said, when I reviewed the cabinet forward plan, and I picked out there's a great big long list which I believed were specific to the place overview group. Now, even with 2 extra meetings, we will not cover that list, so it will need a selection progress if you decide to go ahead with 2 special meetings prior to March. Okay. So it would need a review, I think, and it would need, so I suggest that we actually make our suggestions to you and let you decide what would be in those menus.
Sorry, folks, I keep forgetting that. Yeah, obviously, regarding the process, if we can just complete the prep, which is the scrutiny request form. Okay, that could be open, transparent. That goes to myself, the rest of the committee, into Claire as the clerk, and we can go from there. We've got your recommendation, which we need to vote on, but obviously the constitutional side of that's also been presented to us by Richards. We know what the process of that's going to be. So I think, I understand what you're all saying. You all know the process, but I think we probably need to move on now. Probably vote on your recommendation. Second, and go from then move on. Is that okay, Chris?
Yeah, I'm happy to vote on it. Yeah.
Richard, do you want to read? Yeah. I was going to slope your shoulder as one of you two like to just read out Chris's recommendation. How we done?
So I've got that the committee requests that the Constitutional Review Working Group consider a review of the frequency of place overview and scrutiny meetings with a recommendation that these should track cabinet meetings.
Those want to show for, please indicate. Against? Any abstentions? Okay. Okay. That's all right.
We're all going to suffer from meeting fatigue here.
Right, and I think that. We possibly don't need that. Okay, at the moment, we know there's the potential for special meetings coming, and there will be a special meeting of the Future Places projects come to us as they're projected to be. But at the moment, the next one's scheduled for Wednesday, the 1st of March. As we said, the Future Places issue, we're going to have to schedule a meeting in for that. So what I suggest I do, I'll send an email out this week to say if anyone, committee members can say, I'm not available on certain dates, then we can try and avoid those.
Okay, can I just ask, would that be looking purely at Future Places and that be the only agenda item? Because it could be possible that you could include 1 or 2 of these other items. I think if we're and then have 1 more before March.
I think that's reasonable. I think that would be a path I would like to follow. But obviously, a lot of it be depending on reports, things like that. But I think that's reasonable to say, if we're doing 1 meeting to discuss a big agenda point, there'd be no reason we couldn't expand it to cover some other things as requested by committee members. So thanks for that. Okay, so right, I'll let you all go home and folks to your families. Stay safe. Try and stay dry. Okay, thanks for your time, everybody. And there's some good comments there, and we'll see hopefully some good will come of it.